Chapter 13-17. They're back! At this moment, Farrell's whole body suddenly trembled. Then, he hugged his head and squatted down. No matter how Clown's fists bombarded his body, he didn't seem to feel any pain. Finally, Clown gave up attacking this guy. They're back. Suddenly, Farrell stood up, and a violent aura emanated from his body like a tornado. While he was still in shock, he had already crossed the distance and appeared in front of Clown in a flash. Clown's superhuman senses couldn't catch Farrell's movements. Then, under Clown's incredulous gaze, he saw Farrell reach out and tear open his holy armor, his breastplate. Get lost! After tearing open Clown's breastplate, Farrell threw out a punch. Clown's body was directly smashed into the ground. At this moment, Farrell, who was holding a piece of Clown's holy armor in his hand, directly looked at Caesar. Caesar had the blood of an orc, but at this moment, he was a real beast. Flash. He didn't have time to react, and his chest was directly hit. The dark purple holy armor was instantly smashed into pieces, turned into light, and returned to the holy seal. At the same time, the indestructible lake light was seized by Farrell. It was also a punch. Caesar was directly smashed into the building. In the blink of an eye, Caesar and Clown were both defeated by Farrell. Farrell didn't stop. He didn't even look at Catherine and the others from the myth of Doomsday. As if he had gone crazy, he raised his breastplate with one hand as a shield and held the indestructible lake light with the other, and rushed toward the place where the black light was emitting. The elven mark on the blade shone brightly. Under the pitch-black brilliance, it was like a firefly. Demon! Die! Farrell roared. At this moment, he madly rushed in, raised the indestructible lake light in his hand, and directly slashed at Hopkins without saying a word. At this moment, Sir Hopkins only felt an endless stream of vitality beginning to flow from the Holy Grail into his body through his hands. His aged skin began to regain its firmness. His white hair also began to turn pitch black. His skinny body also began to slowly become stronger. He was experiencing the process of recovering from old age to youth. This wonderful feeling of regaining control of life made him lose himself in the endless sea of passion. When Farrell's sword slashed, he suddenly woke up from this wonderful feeling. He was so frightened. He was afraid that in the end, all of this would be destroyed by Farrell's strike. No! Sir Hopkins furiously. However, Farrell's target wasn't him. It was the Holy Grail in his hands. Clang! The indestructible lake light broke through the black light and slashed at the edge of the Holy Grail. Only the sound of collision could be heard. It was like the sound of a huge bell. The whole city shook. Crack! Broken. It was the indestructible lake light that was broken. The blade directly shattered into stardust in front of Farrell. Then, a huge force was released from the Holy Grail, and directly blasted him away. The shield of the holy armor in his hand directly shattered under the release of this force. Farrell crossed his hands in front of his body to protect himself. 2 long traces of his legs were left on the ground. His white suit was already tattered, and a large part of his body was exposed. At this moment, there was boiling steam coming out. His skin looked like it was burned. He blocked it, but at the same time, he became more confused, crazy, and even terrified. I can't win. I can't win, no matter what. I can't win. Why? At this moment, he abruptly pressed his hands against his head. The moment he looked at the Holy Grail, his entire body began to tremble. Countless fallen figures appeared before his eyes, one after another, their faces filled with despair. Those were his comrades and companions who were killed by him during the riot. They seemed to be mocking him or scolding him. They rushed up and began to choke his neck and grab his hands and feet. The ground seemed to have turned into a swamp, and countless ghosts reached out their hands from the swamp. In the darkness, they seemed to want to drag him into the swamp. Don't come over! Don't come over! He turned around and rushed out to escape. "Don't follow me! Don't follow me! I didn't kill them! I didn't kill them! Get away!" The craziness and panic of the most powerful knight in history made everyone dumbfounded. He actually escaped like this. While being dumbfounded, everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. After all, no one wanted to face this monster again. It was just that, what kind of terrifying thing could cause him to be so terrified that he would flee in panic like a coward? No one knew. They just subconsciously looked at the black light that didn't disperse, and a sense of fear slowly rose in their hearts. Catherine hugged her arms tightly in fear. In the distance, Miss Witch, who had thought that victory was in her grasp, felt a mighty force that caused her soul to sink into boundless darkness even though she didn't know what Farrell was trying to do. She wasn't much better than Farrell. After a scream, the witch ran away from this place. Laughter. At first, it was a chuckle, and then it was an arrogant and wild laughter that even Sir Hopkins himself didn't think would appear on him. He wasn't arrogant, or else he wouldn't have planned everything so carefully. He wouldn't have waited until his hair was white before he started everything, but the power that surged into his body made him instantly lost in the whirlpool of endless power. Even the most powerful knight in history ran away like a stray dog under the power of the Holy Grail. He saw it with his own eyes. The power seemed to have opened all the nerves of the knight in an instant. An indescribable feeling of refreshment washed away his calmness. Calmness, scheming, thinking, what was the use of these, under this invincible power? The inhuman's insufferably arrogant gaze and the natural contempt for ordinary humans. It wasn't that they were arrogant, but when their power reached this level, they didn't need to care about the shackles of the world anymore. Great! The power of the Holy Grail was still coming. The more top-grade items were sacrificed, the more powerful its effect would be. Hopkins looked at his strong arms with fascination, feeling the youthful vitality of every part of his body, and the change from a white-haired old man to a strong man. He stopped his wild laughter and called out softly, "Mordred!" A huge holy seal appeared on his chest, and at the same time, a set of holy armor that was secretly hidden in the manor disappeared instantly and then appeared on the knight's body. The moment his palm touched the armor, the holy armor turned into a stream of light and covered the body of Sir Hopkins. Mordred's holy armor, surging power began to flow into his body. At this moment, Sir Hopkins casually threw out a punch. Boom! With one punch, more than half of the broken palace was destroyed just like that. He slowly raised the arm that threw out the punch and clenched it. At this moment, it was as if the whole world was already in his palm. He suddenly waved his hand. In the already destroyed royal auditorium, the floor directly cracked open, and the broken stones and broken furniture were all pushed to the side. As the floor cracked open, a flight of stairs began to appear. On the stairs, a huge throne made of various materials finally appeared in front of him just like that. Sir Hopkins looked at the Holy Grail in his hand with satisfaction. It was like a scepter that allowed him to control the world at will. Everything was according to his will. He was immersed in this happy feeling, and walked step by step toward the throne on the step. What no one noticed was that when the black light of the Holy Grail emitted, the body of Knight Lancelot, who was buried under the rubble, quietly wrapped around a trace of black fog. Rumble, inside the collapsed building, a figure flipped over a huge boulder that fell on him and staggered out. It was Mr. Clown. At this moment, Mr. Clown pressed one hand on his shoulder, and his steps were a bit light, but he still walked step by step toward the royal auditorium. Along the way, Mr. Clown saw Catherine, Judas, and a few others. They gathered together, and their expressions were a bit blank, as if they were looking for Caesar. Mr. Clown ignored them and walked into the auditorium. Although the dome was broken, the auditorium was still shining with a dazzling golden light. On the steps, on the huge throne, Hopkins, who was wearing the holy armor, was holding his chin with one hand and looking down from the throne. The Holy Grail was still in his hand. In front of him, his adopted son, Orphan, was kneeling on one knee in front of him. Simpton, who was seriously injured but still managed to crawl out from the rubble, was also kneeling in front of Hopkins. Her Majesty the Queen was also there. Her Majesty the Queen was now shackled by many halos. Her Majesty the Queen lowered her head, and her expression was obviously not good. Dagonite. Hopkins moved his gaze forward a bit. Thank you for your hard work, my knight. It is indeed a bit difficult for you to resist Farrell. Come forward. Mr. Clown shrugged, came to the side of Simpton and Orphan, and also knelt on one knee on the ground. At this moment, Hopkins suddenly said, I will be crowned as the king here. Orphan. At this moment, Orphan nodded and then stood up directly. His hands were holding the ancient crown that he had brought at the beginning. He held the crown, lowered his head, and walked up the steps step by step, but at this moment Hopkins suddenly waved his hand and said, Wait a minute, my child. Orphan's expression changed slightly, and then he raised his head in astonishment. He saw that Hopkins wasn't looking at him, but at the night sky. He then raised his head as well. Above the broken dome of the auditorium, there were many figures floating in the air. There were probably more than 30 or 40 of them. These people were all wearing gray and black robes that covered their faces. Every one of them was emitting a strong aura of magic power. Sir Hopkins glanced at them casually, then smiled, and looked at the Queen, who was standing quietly with her head lowered at the bottom of the steps. It seems that your backer has finally arrived. I'm more curious, how did you manage to invite these magicians, Elizabeth? Probably because I transferred the mining rights of the several mineral resources in the Eastern Secret Land. The Queen raised her head. Now that I think about it, I'm really a prodigal person. The Eastern Secret Land. Hopkins frowned. He knew the amount of mineral resources in that place. Those hidden ores were all very precious magic materials. You're really generous. After all, you've always been by my side. The Queen looked quite helpless at this moment, so, why can't you be more careful? Hopkins turned back. In fact, I'm still more used to your white-haired appearance, which makes me feel that time has actually passed. Ridiculous. Hopkins shook his head, then slowly stood up from the throne. Maybe in your eyes, the inhuman power doesn't have any concept at all. Even the difference between an ordinary knight and the 12 knights, in your eyes, is only the difference between a boxer and an ordinary person? Sometimes, quantity doesn't determine victory. In this regard, that Mr. Prime Minister has actually verified it. Is this really the only way? The Queen sighed. Hopkins, do you really think that these people from the Magicians' Association can fight against the current me? Hopkins waved his hand. It doesn't matter. Since it's my coronation, of course, I need some spectators. Although there aren't many people, if they're all magicians, it's still okay. One of the many magicians who had been gazing from the sky suddenly said, This is the spoils of war that were distributed to the knights after the Great War back then, the Holy Grail. It seems that you're also familiar with that period of history, Hopkins said indifferently. Maybe you're still very young and don't know its true power. That's not necessarily true. This man with a little light bird on his shoulder, Mr. Ace, one of the 4 deacons of the Magicians' Association's Secret Arts Tower, smiled and said, In terms of spoils of war, didn't we also hide too? Are you going to fight against me on behalf of the Magicians' Association? Hopkins asked expressionlessly. No. Deacon Ace shook his head. I'm just representing the Magicians' Association to complete the employment task entrusted by our employer. Well, Hopkins shook his head with a little pity, then sighed and said, I'll let you see my current power, and then I'll give you another chance. Choose surrender. Or become my sacrifice. With that, Hopkins punched out casually. The wave of fist light rushed out. The people of the Magicians' Association seemed to have been prepared, and they all raised their hands in an instant, but before they launched their magic, two figures appeared like lightning and blocked the fist light. When the light dissipated, the two figures landed in the middle of the auditorium. One of them was wearing an azure holy armor. They looked at Hopkins, who was sitting on the throne, with a heavy expression. "Oh, Gareth and Bedivere, you're here too." Hopkins smiled and opened his hands. "Are you here to celebrate the birth of the new king, knights?" "Mr. Hopkins, is it really you?" Gareth looked sad. "For your own selfish reasons. Is it really you? Actually, you think I'm wrong, is that true?" Hopkins shook his head. "Why don't you think that under my leadership, Britain will regain the honor of being the strongest country in the world? Why don't you think I'll do better?" "I'm sorry, I can't agree with such brutal success." Gareth took a deep breath and slowly pulled out his sword. "Mr. Hopkins, please turn back." The moment Gareth activated his weapon, dozens of black shadows appeared behind Bedivere, densely filling the auditorium. Among them, several of the shadow people were directly guarding Her Majesty the Queen's side at this time. "You've been frightened, Your Majesty the Queen," Bedivere said in a deep voice. "I'm sorry to let you see this kind of thing inside the Knights organization. We'll clean it up right away." "Ha ha 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 ha." Hopkins's carnival-like laughter appeared again. It was difficult to define his state at this time. Perhaps his personality hadn't changed, but it had been affected in some way. He would no longer keep himself calm, following his heart, so it was obviously more pleasurable. "You guys aren't enough." Hopkins's eyes suddenly became crazed. "What if you add us?" Outside the Royal Auditorium, an aged voice suddenly rang out. Along with the voice, several figures rushed into the auditorium. Behind these figures, two old men slowly walked in. They were clearly the only two remaining cabinet elders of the Knights organization, respectively in charge of Odin's Treasure and Birmingham's Knights organization. And behind them, several core members of the Myth of Doom, Catherine, Judas, Tipu, and Dobas, were already restrained and escorted in by more than a dozen knights. All of them revealed a defeated expression and hung their heads dejectedly. Hashtag PS. The next chapter will be later. Genius remembers this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1318. Trusty. Gareth cried out in surprise, and then looked at the other figures that had arrived with the bearded man. "Garis, Kai, Eckhart, you guys." The first few figures who appeared were none other than the current 12 Round Table members who escorted the different pavilion elders to the Mist City. When the Mist City was in a riot, they were the first to take action. They were responsible for suppressing different places and evacuating the crowd. "We received a message from Bedivere," Trusty said in a deep voice. It was hard to believe at first, but now, shaking his head, Trusty's expression didn't look good. He sighed and looked at the clown Dagonet. "It seems that there's a traitor among us." "Thank you for the compliment." Mr. Clown showed a bright smile. Seeing this, Gareth gritted his teeth and his eyes dimmed. At this moment, one of the two pavilion elders who led a group of knights stepped forward. "Hopkins, I'm sad for the bloodline of the Night King. Surrender." Not only were there 6 12 Round Table members in the auditorium, but there were also the magician troops waiting in the sky. Outside the Royal Auditorium, there were also hundreds of powerful middle-level and upper-level knights. At this moment, this place was completely surrounded. The first one. Right at this moment, Hopkins suddenly opened his mouth and said something. What followed was a dark red ray of light that shot out from his slightly raised finger. The ray of light directly passed through the crowd, passed through the 12 people at the round table, and directly pierced through the forehead of the cabinet elder who had just spoken. A second ago, he was still speaking righteously and majestically, but in the next second, he completely lost his head, and his body fell to the ground. Puff! Until the body fell and made a dull sound, everyone, all the members of the Night Mechanical Unit who were present, as if they had just woken up from a dream, showed an extremely shocked and furious expression. The second one. But it wasn't over yet. When the finger pointed, the red light shot out again. In the auditorium, a knight who was watching the Doomsday Myth prisoner was directly penetrated in the chest, and became a corpse. "Hopkins!" An angry voice suddenly came out of Tresty's mouth. In an instant, the 12 Round Table members put on their armor and attacked Sir Hopkins, who was on the stairs. Sir Hopkins sneered at this moment, and the Holy Grail in his hand was easily swung out. The 6 knights who had inherited the power and the highest combat power of the Knight Mechanical Unit were swept to the ground at the same time by an unbelievably powerful force. The holy armors on their bodies directly exploded, and the fragments returned to their holy seals. Defeat. Defeat in an instant. The royal auditorium was dead silent at this moment. Even the magicians who were temporarily watching the battle were silent at this moment. It was fine if they didn't know, but if they didn't know the 12 Round Table members, they would know what kind of ability they had the ability. At this moment, as he watched Gareth and the others fall to the ground and vomit blood incessantly, the expression of the last surviving Edinburgh Knights Cabinet Elder changed drastically. It wasn't just him. The numerous middle and upper-level knights beside and behind him were all the same. Fear grew, I've said it before. Looking at the dead silent Sir Hopkins, he smiled faintly and said, "I'll give you a chance to choose. Everyone from the Magicians' Association. Of course, this includes all the knights here. And you, Rolford." His gaze finally fell on the Edinburgh Grand Elder. "Do you plan to kneel before me and become the new king, or do you plan to be buried here to accompany your old friends?" Sir Hopkins's gaze instantly became majestic. Under his gaze, the last Grand Elder suddenly couldn't bear it and knelt on the ground subconsciously. He looked at all this in horror. He looked at the other 12 Round Table members and the middle-level and upper-level knights who were looking at him with either fear, disbelief, or confusion. In the end, he gritted his teeth. "Since he couldn't resist, then, new king, I'm willing to submit to you." He took a deep breath and said, "I'll become your follower." "Good. Rolford, I knew you were a smart person." Hopkins said, "Do you know why I didn't kill you the second time? Because next, I'll be reorganizing the Knight organization, so I need someone who can help me manage it. In the future, in the new Knight organization, you'll be the one with the highest authority besides me." "Thank you," he didn't say much. Since he had already decided to submit, this Grand Elder was very clear about his current position and position. "Then, what about you?" Sir Hopkins looked around at everyone at this time. "Become my sacrifice, or become the sword in my hand, help me open up a prosperous Britain, and become the hero and legend of the new era? I'm willing to submit to you, new king." Unexpectedly, the first one to shout out was Mr. Clown, who had a bright smile on his face. Even though he was originally on Sir Hopkins's side, he was still the first to kneel down. "Dagonite, you bastard!" Gareth, who had always been modest to others, wiped the blood from his mouth, stood up again, and cursed. By the way, as if he was afraid that Gareth wasn't angry enough, Mr. Clown narrowed his eyes and laughed. "I was the one who destroyed the headquarters of the Fog City. I also cut off Geraint's head with my own hand." What, Mr. Gareth, who had already stood up, suddenly felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, and his hands hung down powerlessly. "I'm willing to submit to you, my king." Suddenly, a deep voice sounded from Gareth's side. What made him unable to believe was that the person who followed the Clown Dagonite's submission was actually a fellow member of the Round Table 12. The one with the name K. "Please accept my loyalty, future king." Another member of the 12 Round Table made his choice at this time. "Eckhart. Even you?" Mr. Gareth was shocked and angry at this moment, and even more so, sad. One after another, the middle and upper-level knights knelt on the ground after the only Grand Elder and a few other members of the 12 Round Table had taken the lead to submit. Even half of the knights, who were watching over the few people of the mythical doomsday, had also chosen to submit at this time. Mr. Gareth's footsteps staggered, and he kept turning his body in place. Every time a voice made an oath, it was the time for him to move his weak legs. Not long after, more than 60% of the knights had already made their choice to submit to him. It's true, the tables have turned just like that? The voice of the mythical doomsday pharmacist Tipu, who was shackled, sounded incongruously at this moment. Gareth obviously heard it, but he couldn't say anything to refute it. He looked at the small number of knights who were at a loss, but in the end, they still chose to remain silent and didn't step out to submit to him. In the end, only he, Bedivere, and Tresty, the 3 members of the 12 Round Table, were still standing upright. If that's the case. Hopkins shook his head at this time, seemingly a little dissatisfied. Not all the knights of the Round Table had chosen to submit to this point. Gareth, Tresty, Bedivere, you have chosen to oppose me, right? I can't violate the oath I made. Gareth took a deep breath. Even if I'm the only one left, isn't there still me? The bearded man clenched his fists at this time, and his originally pale face had a touch of indomitable will. Of course, there's still Bedivere. I've decided, on my epitaph, I will engrave the names of my best friends in this life, Gareth and Bedivere, your original names. If that's the case, I'd better choose to betray you, Dr. Bedivere said indifferently. Even so, he silently walked to the side of the 2 people. The knights began to move. Those who submitted silently gathered under the stairs, and those who didn't submit in the end silently came behind the remaining 3 members of the 12 Round Table. In the end, more than 70% of them separated. Sir Hopkins, who quietly watched all of this, showed a trace of a smile, and looked up at the magician troops at the top. So, what's your choice? But after a moment of silence, Ace slowly said, It seems that the content of this employment has far exceeded the degree of the preset. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I think the several Tower Masters should now feel that the things you've done are not worth us continuing to maintain this employment relationship. Mr. Hopkins, right? Are you really not going to let us leave? Send my regards to your chairman. Hopkins said indifferently at this time. Just say, after the matter here is over, I will personally visit. But, you don't have to rush to leave, you might as well participate in my coronation ceremony. As you wish. Mr. Ace smiled faintly, the new King of Britain. Sir Hopkins waved his hand, then sat back on the throne and looked down again. Elizabeth, how is it? All your reliance is gone. I'll also give you a chance to choose. Her Majesty, whose eyes were dim, raised her head at this time, and looked at the throne not far away. She heard Sir Hopkins say calmly, If you also choose to be loyal to me, I may be able to grant you a new life. Even restoring you to your most beautiful age is just a simple matter. Her Majesty the Queen slowly looked at the knights gathered around Hopkins, and then looked at the knights standing behind Gareth and the others, who were completely disproportionate. In the end, she slowly sighed and said with a wry smile, Hopkins, it seems that I have lost. Your choice. He was waiting for the final result. Me. The Queen of Britain will not yield to anyone. The Queen said loudly, Loyal people of the Knight Organization, although I don't have the bloodline of your Knight King. I'm the current Queen of Britain's most legitimate heir to the royal family. I'm very happy that you can still stand by my side in this most difficult time. While life still exists and power still exists, I will accompany you to welcome the last darkness before dawn. No. Gareth took a deep breath at this time. In front of this great danger, he said, if I have to choose a king, I'd rather choose you, my Majesty the Queen. The king that the knights should be loyal to should be like you. Please accept my allegiance, your Majesty the Queen. As if to fight against Hopkins, Gareth knelt down in front of the Queen. Seeing this, Bedivere and Tresty looked at each other and made the same choice. The small number of middle-ranking and high-ranking knights who remained also swore an oath to the Queen. This was the first time in the history of the knight organization that knights swore to the so-called royal family, instead of the cold statue of the Knight King in the organization. Wang Tsung disdained to do it himself, especially when he had enough followers. At this moment, Simpton coldly snorted, and then waved his evil sword, which directly stabbed into the ground in front of Simpton. "Kill them all." Hopkins waved his hand. "Pledge your loyalty to me, knights." Simpton directly lifted the magic sword. The pitch-black magic energy started to wrap around his body, and then the magic armor appeared. He was the first to move. "Like I said, Mr. Gareth, when you are needed, you will also need people like me." The holy armor was broken, and it was still repairing itself in the holy seal. Facing Simpton, who was wearing the magic armor, Gareth could only fight with his usual sword. As for Mr. Clown and the other knights of the Round Table, who had submitted to the Queen, they slowly walked toward Tresty and Bedivere. The remaining mid-level and upper-level knights gritted their teeth and raised their swords toward their former companions. "Knights, I'll watch here, I'll stand here. I won't let my eyes close, even if it's just a blink of an eye. I'll stand here until the last one of you falls in front of me." The Queen's voice resounded in the hall, sonorous and powerful, when the last knight falls. "I'll follow you." For the Queen. She was just an ordinary person. Time had robbed her of her beauty, and time had turned her into an old woman who was no longer slim. She was as fragile as a candle in the wind. But just as she said, she would stand here until the last moment. Like a fountain, she didn't bring physical strength to the loyal knights, but courage to press forward. High fighting spirit radiated from their bodies. Compared to the knights who had submitted and raised their weapons silently, the spirit of fighting to the death was so distinct. At this moment, the ones who had submitted were only silently attacking, several against one. For the Queen. The battle surrounded the Queen, and in an instant it started. But no one knew whether it was intentional or not, but the Queen, who was just an ordinary person, stood where no one approached her. From the beginning to the end, just as she said, she didn't close her eyes, and didn't even blink once. She just imprinted the faces in her eyes. Hopkins was very dissatisfied with the Queen's current state, and a kind of irritation began to grow in his heart. The Holy Grail seemed to constantly whisper to him. This voice had been ringing in his mind since the moment it held him up. "Destroy everything, devour everything. Don't hesitate, the strongest power is given to you, destroy everything, devour everything." He shook his head lightly, instinctively wanting to drive this voice out of his head, but in the end, he still slowly stood up. The irritation in his heart made him walk down the throne step by step down the stairs. In the fierce battle that was like a storm, Sir Hopkins entered a place where there was no one, and finally arrived in front of Her Majesty the Queen. "You're really unwise, Elizabeth," Sir Hopkins suddenly sighed. "If it was only the dignity of the country, maybe it would be a good thing. Many times we clearly have the ability to change everything, but in the end we become powerless." The Queen said in a low voice, "A long, long time ago, someone once told me, the only one who can change everything is the one who becomes the king. Is that so?" Sir Hopkins nodded. "Then, stay here with me and watch. Let's see who will become the king in the end." The situation of the battle. Actually, it was clear from the beginning. Temporarily losing the power of the holy armor, Gareth and the other two faced the most dangerous battle. Courage didn't bring enough power to overcome the number of enemies. It couldn't even be considered a fierce battle, it was a completely one-sided battle. The smile on Hopkins' face became wider. Looking at the Queen's stubborn appearance in front of him, the irritation in his heart seemed to be released to the greatest extent. "It seems that the winner and loser will be decided soon." Hopkins smiled. The Queen nodded. "Yes, it seems like it's really so." In the chaotic auditorium, at this moment, there seemed to be a figure quietly approaching behind Sir Hopkins. Bang! Just as Mr. Gareth's sword was blocking the demonic sword, and his body was being pressed down inch by inch to the point where he had reached his limit and was about to lose his life under the demonic sword, a huge force suddenly emanated from the auditorium. Ripples, wave-like ripples rippled out. Accompanied by a strong wind, the weak ones were directly sent flying out of the auditorium by the impact of this force at this moment. The stronger ones had to protect their own bodies with all their strength, but their bodies were also moved back by a large amount. Not many were able to stand firmly in their original places. A black beam of light shot up to the sky. In the corner of the auditorium, where a pile of rubble had been buried, the rubble had turned into powder at this moment. In this black beam of light her body, which was lying on the ground, seemed to be lifted up by some kind of force. Bending her waist, she stood up and then straightened her waist. Her body left the ground and floated. Her hands were slightly spread out, and at the same time she closed her eyes tightly. Her long hair, which was tied up, was also scattered under the violent airflow. Then, under the influence of the airflow, each strand of hair flew up and stood upright. Lancelot, Her Majesty the Queen opened her mouth at this moment. She didn't expect this to happen at this moment, and showed an instant of panic. Under the impact of this powerful force, the remaining powerful knights stared at, the only female knight of the Round Table of this generation, dumbfounded. This wasn't the power of the Round Table. A strong force was constantly emitted from her body, getting stronger and stronger. Finally, she opened her eyes. This pair of eyes seemed to contain no feelings. Wherever her gaze went, the knights felt a tremor from the bottom of their hearts. And Hopkins was already frightened to the point that he broke out in a cold sweat. Outside the auditorium, on the stairs leading to the Royal Auditorium, a figure slowly walked up. It was wearing a black robe and a silver-white mouthless mask on its face, which completely covered its face. When the black light broke through the air and appeared, it stopped. Looking at the black light, it seemed to be thinking about something. Its hand was holding something at this moment. The head. It was Caesar's head. Hashtag 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 PS. 13/30. Chapter 13:19. She was still wearing the same neutral attire of a tuxedo and a white shirt, but she was different from her usual simple attire. Right now, she had an indescribable beauty, or rather, a seductive beauty. The huge power she released seemed to be endless. She slowly moved toward Sir Hopkins. The black light supported her body, and her empty eyes seemed to indicate that she was not in a normal state. Since Lancelot released her power, Sir Hopkins felt an unprecedented danger approaching, as if the Holy Grail in his hand couldn't eliminate his uneasiness. And she slowly approached, as if there was nothing that could stop her. Sir Hopkins's pupils contracted slightly. He looked around and then fixed his eyes on Simpton. After seeing Hopkins's gaze, Simpton didn't stop. As if he had an instinctive reaction, he directly gave up the great opportunity to kill Gareth. Like a flash of black lightning, he raised the demon's sword and flashed in front of Lancelot. From top to bottom, the demon's sword drew a straight line. Perhaps it was going to split Lancelot in half. Right now, she didn't react at all. When the blade of the demon's sword approached her, even her eyes didn't change. She just stretched out her palm. As if there was a black light, it violently contracted and expanded at this moment. Simpton, who was wearing a black armor, was embedded in the air. It was like turning from a three-dimensional to a two-dimensional space. This strange scene startled the remaining people, and the next scene was even more frightening than when Sir Hopkins defeated the Knights of the Round Table with one strike. Because they heard the sound of something breaking. It sounded like something was breaking. Simpton's body shattered like a crack that fell to the ground, turning into pieces of irregular fragments. He was directly shattered. Only the demon's sword was left, falling to the ground. This isn't the power of inheritance. The Knights of the Round Table, regardless of whether they had surrendered to the side or resisted, had all worked with Lancelot before. As the only female round table knight of the current generation, it could be said that she was the most popular person among the knights. Everyone knew her. Is she really Lancelot and not another Hopkins? What are you talking about? I don't know. I just feel like it. Whispering didn't stop or change anything at this moment. Before the shock of Simpton's death could be digested, Lancelot started to move again. Her target was still Sir Hopkins. Finally, Sir Hopkins's eyes focused to the extreme. Feeling the powerful surging power in his body, under this instinctive threat and fear, he directly threw a punch. Just like that, a beam of light with terrifying power was shot out, crashing directly into Lancelot. A seemingly invisible barrier appeared in front of Lancelot. Sir Hopkins's attack seemed to have hit a mirror. The attack that came from the front was reflected from the side in the next moment. The power of the attack was not weak in the slightest. After the reflection, a corner of the auditorium was directly smashed into pieces. A crack even directly split open on another building outside the auditorium. Sir Hopkins's eyes suddenly widened. He exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and continuously threw out punches that were much faster than clowns. Dozens of light bullets, at this moment, seemed to shoot out from the same plane at the same time, the concentrated light bullets, each containing extremely destructive power. When these dozens of light bullets arrived, that invisible barrier appeared once again. Perhaps only when this barrier appeared and the moment the light bullets hit the barrier would they be able to see its existence. But the light bullets were still reflected in the end. Boom, 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 boom. The light bullets that were reflected and shot out were crazily destroying everything around, dozens, hundreds, and even close to 1,000. The number of light bullets kept increasing, and the speed at which they were shot out also increased crazily. However, the speed at which they were reflected also increased at the same speed. Finally, Sir Hopkins stopped. Even with his powerful physique and crazy power, under this kind of continuous attack, he already felt a trace of fatigue. There was no way to stop it. Lancelot had already moved to the front of Sir Hopkins. The distance between them was as long as an arm's length. I don't believe it. Sir Hopkins lowered his head and looked at his own palm, muttering to himself. Finally, his face became ferocious, and the craziest side that was hidden in his heart was completely stimulated. Holy Grail! He raised the Holy Grail in his hand. Black rays were shot out from the Holy Grail and reflected. The rays of light released from the Holy Grail were like the curves of fireworks falling in the night sky. One after another, they were reflected in front of this invisible barrier. Even the power of the Holy Grail. I don't believe it. Sir Hopkins was in disbelief at first, then he panicked, and then he lost his sense of propriety. He was like a child who was holding a weapon, but was shouting why he couldn't win against the adults in front of him. The Holy Grail was still under his control, launching fierce attacks, but he himself was retreating step by step under these attacks. He retreated, until he retreated to the first step of the stairs leading to the throne. He suddenly lost his balance and fell back, sitting on the stairs, but he didn't stop launching attacks from the Holy Grail. You're not Lancelot. Hopkins suddenly shivered. Who are you? As if she didn't hear him, she just stretched out her hand and made a grabbing motion. The Holy Grail was directly taken away from Hopkins's hand at this moment. The moment the Holy Grail left his hand, a huge uneasiness and fear, as if half of his body was cut off, instantly made Hopkins lose all his reason. Give it back to me. Give it back to me, mine. It's mine, it's mine. It's mine. As if feeling Hopkins's madness at this moment, the Mordred's holy armor directly gave him more power. In an instant, the holy armor released a strong light. It's mine! The power that burst out once again pushed everyone out like the eye of a whirlwind. Countless gravel directly rolled up at this moment. Hopkins attacked her recklessly. Bang! It was the same feeling of expansion and contraction. Time seemed to stop on Hopkins for a second, and when time flowed again, the Mordred's holy armor was already full of all kinds of cracks. It seemed like it would break at any time. Hopkins directly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body was directly embedded in the stairs, smashing a huge hole in it. But she didn't care about Hopkins's existence from beginning to end. The moment the Holy Grail was in her hand, her empty eyes only looked at the Holy Grail in her hand. Chi. The Holy Grail, who at this moment began to tremble violently, as if it was struggling. Finally, her already terrifying power was released, and it increased by several times again. Crack! At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared at the bottom of the Holy Grail, and then, like the lines of thunder, it went up. The moment the crack extended to the mouth of the cup, the Holy Grail directly split into two halves. You broke it! You broke it! You actually broke it! I won't let you go! Never! It was as if his beloved was taken away. The moment the Holy Grail broke, Sir Hopkins had already lost control. But the Holy Grail did break. Like a broken cup, it directly fell to the ground. The moment it fell to the ground, everyone in the magician's troupe opened their eyes wide. This was as famous as the 2 secret treasures of the Magicians' Association. It was almost a godly item, and it directly, after the Holy Grail shattered and fell to the ground, Lancelot suddenly stopped moving. The huge power in her body also began to decrease at this moment. Her hair slowly fell down. She also fell from the state of being in the air to the ground, as if she withdrew from one state to another. The moment she fell to the ground, Lancelot directly fell to the ground. I won't let you go, Lancelot. But Sir Hopkins, who had already lost control, couldn't suppress the anger in his heart at this moment. He got out of the hole in the stairs and launched an angry attack on Lancelot, who fell to the ground again. Although the Holy Grail disappeared, the power he had obtained didn't seem to disappear. Go to hell! Hopkins' fist, which was covered with the holy armor, fiercely punched towards Lancelot's head. However, at this moment, when his fist was about to smash Lancelot's head, something seemed to block his fist. It was a spear, or rather, a spear tip that was cut off from a spear. The spear tip was only about 1 foot long. At that moment, the person holding the tip of the spear in his hand was a black-robed figure with a faceless mask who had appeared at some point in time. At this moment, the black-robed man blocked Poohkin's attack, he suddenly turned around and kicked Poohkins in the chest, directly sending him flying. Who was it? In the midst of his astonishment, Hopkins' mind was in a mess. Time and time again, someone appeared to block him. The kick didn't cause any real damage to him, it only had the effect of pushing him back. When Hopkins stood up again, the veins on his forehead had already swelled up due to his anger, but at this moment a shrill scream rang out. Caesar! That was Catherine's blood-curdling scream. She fell to the ground in an instant, her eyes staring blankly. Her face also became pale, as if she had lost her soul. She suddenly grabbed her own face with both hands, forcefully scratching out traces of blood. Catherine! In the end, as if she couldn't bear the pain at this moment, Catherine directly spat out a mouthful of blood and then collapsed. Is it really? Oberon? In the ruins, Gareth and Tresty supported each other and staggered out. Their bodies were almost pushed out of the royal auditorium under the impact of the final burst of power between Lancelot and Hopkins. But, the moment they saw the head in the black-robed figure's hand, they still couldn't believe it. They had just fought with Oberon a few hours ago, so they had a very deep understanding of Oberon's strength. This guy was able to injure the abnormal feral. At this moment, the black-robed and masked mysterious person directly threw Caesar's head out, towards Hopkins. Facing Caesar's head flying towards him, Hopkins almost didn't hesitate at all. He directly punched out and directly blew up the entire head. Immediately, a mist of blood surged. At the same time, Catherine, who had just woken up and caught a glimpse of this scene, directly passed out again and fell into Judith's arms. "Who are you?" He felt threatened, but it was obviously not as terrifying and strong as Lancelot's when she was in that strange state, but at this time, Hopkins, who had already lost the Holy Grail, couldn't help but be vigilant. So far, the changes that had happened were all unexpected, especially the Holy Grail being crushed. The black-robed mysterious person didn't speak at this time. He just casually picked up Lancelot, who was on the ground, and then slowly walked towards Her Majesty. What happened to her? Her Majesty was much calmer than anyone else. Facing this mysterious person, Her Majesty didn't even have the slightest bit of panic, but the Shadow Man's protection that Bedivere had released for her at the beginning had already been exhausted under the continuous attacks. It could be said that the current Her Majesty was really in a state of no protection at all, but she obviously didn't have the slightest bit of panic. The mysterious person just shook his head and then handed over Lancelot. Then, he turned around again and faced Sir Hopkins. Her Majesty helped Lancelot to sit down. After feeling Lancelot's breathing, she slightly relaxed. "Who is it? Elizabeth, your person?" Hopkins frowned. After the Holy Grail was crushed, his madness seemed to have gradually subsided, and he began to calm down a little. Her Majesty slowly stood up and said softly, "Just think of it as my guardian angel, someone who will always protect me." "Your protector?" Hopkins frowned again. "Ridiculous. If you really have a guardian, it's impossible for the Knight organization to not have a record, and it's an inhuman at this level. Elizabeth, do you really think that such a lie can fool people?" Hopkins snorted coldly, then looked at the magician team hiding in the sky. They had been watching the battle silently like a poisonous snake, and could suddenly attack at any time. He sneered and said, "I'm afraid you're also a member of the Magician Association, right? What you're holding, if I'm not wrong, is probably one of the trophies of the Magician Association from 100 years ago. Holy Spear, Longinus, right?" The mysterious person stretched out his hand, and half of the tip of the spear slowly stretched out from his robe. It looked inconspicuous, and there were even rust stains on it. But it was this spear tip, which seemed to have decayed, that forcibly blocked the furious strike of Hopkins, who was full of power. "Sir." Unexpectedly, at this time, Deacon Ace, who had been silently watching the battle, suddenly said, "I admire you for recognizing the Holy Spear at a glance. Indeed, this is indeed the trophies, you know. However, we don't know who its current user is. I can tell you very clearly that it's not a member of our Magician Association." "Ridiculous. If it's not a member of your association, if it's not the user of the Holy Spear, do you think that your Tower Master will be willing to let an outsider use it?" Hopkins shook his head. "What if it can only be used once?" Deacon Ace said indifferently, "What if the Holy Spear has a spell engraved by several Tower Masters together? No matter where it is lost, it will instantly return to the Tower Master's side. I forgot to say, this Holy Spear is also in the employment contract of Her Majesty, and it was the first to arrive here, so even if I want to take it back, it's impossible. Of course, not just anyone can use the Holy Spear. So I'm also very curious about what this guardian looks like. If possible, maybe you can take off its mask yourself. I'll look forward to it." Hopkins' face darkened. After losing the Holy Grail, the feeling of being in control gradually faded away. When he regained his senses, he couldn't help but be alarmed at how he had fallen under the temptation of the Holy Grail in such a short time. As far as the eye could see, the knights had either collapsed or died. Even the knights at the Round Table were either severely injured or unable to fight anymore. Even Simpton, the magic sword user that he had spent a lot of time cultivating, was already dead. Obviously, this wasn't what he wanted. Now, if he couldn't defeat this mysterious guardian by the Queen's side, then what awaited him would be eternal damnation. Also, there was the magician army that was eyeing him covetously. But he already had the Mordred's holy armor, which meant that he had the same powerful strength as Farlier. After this victory, he could still regroup. His body had already recovered its youth, which meant that time had reset, and he could do more things in the future. The Holy Grail was only the path to an inhuman power. Now that he had obtained it, although it was already destroyed, at least he wouldn't lose himself and become its devouring slave. It was both good news and bad news, but it was obviously not a bad situation. Taking a deep breath, his thoughts were completed in an instant. Feeling the surging power, Sir Hopkins revealed a good-looking smile. It seems that this is the final obstacle on my path to becoming a king. It doesn't matter. The road to success is always accompanied by cutting through thorns and thorns. Only in this way will the final fruits of victory appear sweet. Hopkins moved. Speed, strength, all of these had directly surpassed the peak that the 12 knights of this generation could reach. The moment Hopkins moved, the mysterious guardian of the royal family also turned into a blur. With the holy spear in hand, it was completely unafraid of Hopkins's attack. But after all, it wasn't the real holy spear user of the Magician Association, and it didn't know how to activate the true power of the holy spear. It only relied on some of the basic passive abilities of the holy spear. It seemed that it would be very difficult for the guardian of the royal family to defeat the powerful Sir Hopkins. Her Majesty the Queen had a hint of nervousness at this time. This is really the last. If it still fails, then we can only. The Queen looked at the back of the guardian in the final battle, and her worry gradually grew stronger. It's not easy for her. Deacon Ace silently watched all of this happen and whispered to his companion beside him. She's just an ordinary person, but she can actually reach this point in the inhuman domain. Should I say she's really worthy of being the longest reigning queen in the world? The final battle hadn't stopped yet. The battle between the guardian of the royal family and Hopkins had moved to the sky above the Palace of Westminster, and it had been going on for a long time. This level of battle had already moved a magician to the extent that he couldn't help but be moved. Deacon Ace had even begun to calculate which side he should help. Perhaps he should wait for the final result. Your power is very strong, far beyond Gareth and Clown, Hopkins said quickly. But compared to me, there's still a big gap. If it weren't for the holy spear, you wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. The guardian of the royal family still didn't speak, but his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Every time Hopkins blocked a blow, it was only a tie. But he still tried to use words to disturb the guardian. Why did you become Elizabeth's guardian? Who are you to the royal family? Actually, you don't have to follow Elizabeth. She's just an old and soft-hearted woman after all. But me. I'm strong now, I have power. All the more reason for you to ally with me. Old man, how can you leave me out of such an interesting battle? A burst of crazy laughter suddenly came from outside the royal hall, and a figure quickly rushed into the night sky. Then, several flashing cold lights directly shot toward the guardian of the royal family. The person who had suddenly made a move was the clown, Dagonet. What shot out were flying knives. The flying knives broke through the air, directly aiming at the vital parts of the guardian's body. The guardian didn't panic in the face of danger, and waved the holy spear to cut down the flying knives one by one. Is it Dagonite? Hopkins couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He didn't expect that the one who persisted until the end was actually this guy. The clown's crying face was very funny, but Hopkins felt that he was quite pleasing to the eye. Then, let's take down this so-called guardian of the royal family together. Hopkins laughed loudly, with the spirit of a monarch who charged and killed the enemy on the battlefield. Okay. Take him down. The sound of laughter came out from Dagonite's mouth, and suddenly it turned cold. Take you down. Take you down. At this moment, Hopkins was ready to throw a punch, but a voice appeared behind him in his ears. One of them flew over and quietly pierced into Sir Hopkins' back. Sharp pain. The sharp pain from his back made Hopkins's eyes widen. The stab in his back made him shocked and angry. Dagonite, you! Without waiting for Hopkins to adapt to this sudden change, the guardian of the royal family took a deep breath at this moment, and directly threw the tip of the holy spear in his hand. Bang! As if he poured all his strength into this attack, the air instantly produced an umbrella-shaped airflow that only appeared when there was a sound barrier. The tip of the spear directly pierced through Sir Hopkins's chest, and then directly into the ground. Why, Dagonite, you! Hopkins lowered his head and looked at the huge wound on his chest. In a moment of absent-mindedness, he only felt that his mind was blank. Suddenly, he thought of something that would happen in countless historical reincarnations. Monarchs often died because of betrayal. Because. The clown laughed in a voice that only he and Hopkins could hear, and said softly, "Elizabeth is my mother. Elizabeth is my mother." Hopkins's body fell from the sky. Above his line of sight was Dagonite's face looking down. That big crying face. He seemed to have fallen into an abyss. Bang! He fell into the ruins of the Royal Auditorium. Ah! The moment he landed, a bloody smell spurted out from his throat. Hopkins painfully stretched out his arm, as if he wanted to grab something first. The guardian of the royal family and the clown Dagonite slowly landed at this time, standing on both sides of Hopkins. "I don't believe it! I don't believe it!" Hopkins's body began to shake violently. The Mordred holy armor that was full of cracks directly shattered at this moment, and the holy seal on his chest also directly peeled off from his body at this time. The holy seal, at this time, was like a huge coat of arms, quietly floating in the air. His arms began to dry up, and his body that was full of vitality also began to lose strength at this time. In the blink of an eye, Hopkins once again became white-haired, even much older than before. My body! My power! My! He crawled on the ground with difficulty like an old dog. It seems that the time estimation is still wrong, you can actually hold on until now. Dagonite smiled and said, "Old man, are you surprised? What did you do to me?" Hopkins couldn't help but howl. Mr. Clown waved his hand and said, "It's nothing. It's just that the sphere that I gave you before, which contained the souls of all the people in the Knight's Mechanism headquarters, didn't contain the souls of Geraint and the others at all. I just found a pig farm and killed pigs to collect them." "You actually," Dagonite laughed and said, "I've been looking for records about the Holy Grail, as well as the influence it caused when it first appeared. I found that this toy is indeed convenient, but it seems to be a little rigid. Although I don't know what the person who created it originally intended to do with it, it's obviously not to help humans fulfill their wishes. It will selectively fulfill the wishes according to the type of wish. Your wish is to have a strong physique, to have the same strength as Farlier, as well as Mordred's holy armor. Old man, you have too many wishes. A retarded way of thinking like Holy Grail can't satisfy you. But it will faithfully fulfill these so-called wishes. So, all your wishes will be fulfilled, but the next best thing is that before this wish is fulfilled, there will be a time limit." Sir Hopkins's face was now as pale as ash. "Of course, if you can continue to contribute offerings, it will naturally continue to renew these wishes." Mr. Clown shrugged and said, "It's like a bottomless pit that can never be filled, and all you can do is to continuously satisfy it, until, in the end, even you are swallowed by it. In this way, I roughly understand the original creator's intention. So, on the whole, you've lost, and you've lost completely, Hopkins." "I don't believe it. I absolutely don't believe it." He wailed and climbed the collapsed stairs leading to the throne. The throne was already damaged, and only a small armrest was left. Dagonite didn't chase after him, and just watched casually. As for the guardian of the royal family, he didn't say a word from the beginning to the end. Finally, Hopkins climbed to the front of the stairs. he used the last of his strength to crawl like a snail to the destroyed throne. Father. Oh, often. He heard a voice. He saw his adopted son who had been lurking around the Prime Minister for many years. Often. My child. Help me. Take me away. Like a dying patient, he grasped the last straw. Often squatted in front of Hopkins in grief and sighed, Father, we lost. Forget it, Her Majesty the Queen might let you go. I didn't lose. I won't lose. That was his last and most resounding voice. With the last of his strength, he grabbed Offan's collar and pulled Offan's face in front of him. His sunken eyes were now bloodshot. Won't lose. Bang! The sound of gunfire. Offen nodded and hugged Sir Hopkins, whispering in his ear, Yes, you won't lose, Father. This is only a nightmare, so I came to drive them away. Even you betrayed me. In his arms, Offen was holding a silver pistol. I'm sorry, Father, Offen whispered. No matter what, before I became your adopted son, it was Elizabeth's mother who adopted me. In addition, Dagonite is actually my older brother. We met her in the orphanage together. No one knew if Hopkins heard the last words. His eyes had lost their luster, and his body was still in Offen's arms, not moving at all. The royal auditorium was now silent. Then, Her Majesty the Queen's voice slowly sounded under the night sky, as if she was relieved. Finally, it's over. The surviving knights began to gather at this moment. Confused and frightened. They supported each other's bodies. They were still divided into two formations. Finally, the surviving knights gathered in front of the stairs leading to the royal auditorium, looking at the ruins of the royal auditorium in silence. A figure slowly walked out of the ruins. It was Her Majesty the Queen. Right now, she only had a slightly tired expression on her face. Behind her, apart from the royal guards, there was also Dagonite and Offen. At the same time, she held a cane in her hand. This was the cane that Hopkins had been holding. On the cane was the Night King's bloodline, the proof of the royal power of the Night royal family. She raised the scepter in her hand, faced the knights, and said loudly, Sir Hopkins and the leader of the myth of Doomsday, Oberon, the culprits of this rebellion, have been executed. There's no need to continue this war. From now on, there's only me in Britain. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Looking around at the quiet bottom of the stairs, Her Majesty the Queen's voice sounded again. If you're still willing to continue fighting, I'll lead my knights to fight with you to the end. In the camp that had already pledged allegiance, at this moment, everyone was looking at Her Majesty, who was standing on the stairs with a complicated expression. They were all silent. What else could they say? Resist? The royal guardians could defeat Hopkins, who had gained great power. But they, including the Knights of the Round Table in the formation, were no longer able to fight. Besides, in the sky, most of the magicians had maintained their combat power from the beginning to the end, and now, they were standing behind Her Majesty the Queen. Clang! Finally, in the camp, someone directly threw down the weapon in his hand. Dagonet, Gareth's expression was very complicated at this moment. He stared blankly at Mr. Clown, who was standing beside the Queen. He wanted to rush up and ask some questions, but in the end, he restrained himself. Finally, he slowly exhaled, only feeling physically and mentally exhausted. He had never spent such a long night. Her Majesty the Queen looked at the crowd and showed a gentle smile. Finally, thank you for being able to survive, my loyal knight. Yes, Your Majesty. The surviving knights in the formation offered their loyalty and knelt down. There weren't many places left in the Palace of Westminster. The number of intact rooms that could be found could be counted with one hand. Finally, Her Majesty the Queen held a box with both hands and came to one of the rooms accompanied by Dagonet and Orphan. Wait for me outside the door. Her Majesty the Queen ordered the two in a low voice. Orphan was a little hesitant, but Mr. Clown didn't seem to care. He whistled and leaned against the wall, using his hands as a pillow. Good child. The Queen smiled and then began to tidy up her clothes in front of the door. After some time, Her Majesty the Queen seemed to be satisfied with her appearance at this time. Then, she took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Open the door, close the door. Her Majesty the Queen took another deep breath and then said with an impeccable smile, "Teacher, I've kept you waiting." In the room, Miss Maid was sitting on the sofa and drinking black tea leisurely. "I made tea. Have a seat," Miss Maid said casually. Her Majesty the Queen walked over slowly and sat down. Her posture was straight and calm. "I haven't drunk tea personally made by teacher for a long time. It's just a tea bag found here," Miss Maid said calmly. The servant girl said indifferently, "If you like it, you can take it back later. Anyway, the whole of Britain, strictly speaking, belongs to you completely now." Her Majesty the Queen's impeccable appearance was defeated in an instant. She sighed and smiled bitterly. Miss Maid put down the teacup and then said indifferently, "Well done. From the beginning to the end, it has been planned. How long did it take you to train Dagonet and Orphan?" Her Majesty the Queen's gaze softened and she said slowly, "Almost 30 years? At that time, they were only as tall as this table. The first time they saw me, they called me Mother. This little guy is quite interesting. He knows how to protect people. What about today? Since we have everything under control, wouldn't it be better to get rid of Hopkins secretly and take over the Prime Minister's control of the Fianna without bloodshed?" Her Majesty the Queen said thoughtfully, "Because what I need is loyalty. I don't want to see a second Hopkins, and I don't want to see people who change sides at the last minute when the crisis comes. Only people with strong wills can be the real pillars of the country. Besides, if I don't let Hopkins's plan go to the end, I won't be able to take over the Knights' organization. Although now, it is just a Knights' organization with many things waiting to be done." Miss Maid said with a faint smile, "One was later discovered by the Knights' organization and finally became one of the 12 Round Table. The other was sent to study and finally became Sir Hopkins's adopted son. Then, he hid beside the Prime Minister for Sir Hopkins and secretly gained control of the Fianna. Now everything has come to an end. The other factions of the Knight faction have either died or dispersed. The remaining ones have already pledged their loyalty to you. After obtaining these two powers, your royal authority has truly been unified. You can be considered a true king. You are really scheming, little Elizabeth." Her Majesty the Queen regained her elegant posture and said softly, "Yes, as you said before, teacher, Elizabeth has become a bad woman. Not only has she learned to take advantage of people, but she has also learned to plot, trick, and even cruelty." A smile appeared on Miss Maid's face, and she suddenly asked, "There is still one thing I don't understand. Why did that guy help you? Logically speaking, he should be the one who is tied to Hopkins by blood." Her Majesty the Queen covered her mouth and laughed. "It turns out that there are things in this world that you don't know, teacher. I always thought that you were the one who knew everything." "Elizabeth." Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes. Then, she stretched out her finger and gently stroked the confession on the table. "Do you miss its weight?" Her Majesty the Queen's face changed slightly, and then she whispered quickly, "Because his former wife was Margaret." "Margaret? I see." Miss Maid was stunned, then nodded and showed a look of understanding, "the guardian of the royal family. If so, it is really a wonderful fate." Shaking her head, it seemed that she didn't pay much attention to this kind of thing. Miss Maid regained her indifference at this time, and her eyes were indifferent. "Then, why did you let me stay? Since you already have everything under control, and you don't even need my help. Did you let me stay just to watch this boring power struggle?" "Because you, teacher," Her Majesty the Queen whispered at this time, "when you disappeared that year, you forgot to give me something." "What is it?" "A test paper." Her Majesty the Queen put the box on her lap. "I didn't know, nor did I think about whether I would have a chance to see you again before my life ended. When I saw you appear in the theater with my glasses, it was so incredible for me. Her eyes gradually became hazy. If there are miracles in the world, then I believe that meeting you again is the biggest miracle in my life for me. Teacher, did I pass the test paper I gave you? Miss Maid looked at her silently and didn't say anything. She remembered that the last time she saw her, her hair was still bright. She was silent for a while, and then she asked softly, "What is your wish?" Finally, she opened the box in her hand. While taking out the thing inside, she showed a smile with tears in her eyes. "This is the only request I will make in my life, whether this is a deal or not." What the Queen held in her hand was a crown. "Can you crown me once, teacher?" Yu Ye's eyes became soft. Looking at the old woman who raised the crown in front of her, it was as if she saw the 13-year-old girl who broke into the castle study many years ago and said that she wanted to drive her away. "Really? You have grown up, Elizabeth." She crowned her student with the crown of an emperor. Hashtag 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 PS. 14/30. Chapter 1320. It seemed that there was nothing for them to do since Knight Bedivere left after he succeeded in the Battle of Singing. The orcs in the Fog City had calmed down and were under the control of the knight. As for the group of magicians who were temporarily formed to use the compound spell, they had also dispersed. It suddenly became deserted, which made Ching Yiran and the others feel a little uncomfortable. It was probably a process where ordinary people got involved in mysterious events, participated in mysterious events, became a part of the event, suddenly solved, and finally became at a loss of what to do. At this time, they sat down in a damaged bar near the street where the huge compound sound amplification was located. The guests here, including the owner and bartender of the bar, were all gone. Will found a few bottles of wine that had not been broken and put some money on the counter. Then, he asked the others to move the messy tables and chairs, barely managing to piece together a complete place. Well, no matter what, in short. Will looked at his companions who were silently looking at him, and smiled. "Cheers, how about it?" "Cheers." Alcohol was a very good thing, for people who liked it. After drinking 2 cups of wine, even his originally dull and numb nerves began to come alive. Then, under the gradually excited atmosphere, they began to discuss what happened today. Until now, they had the time to discuss. Klein and Nick were not here. They had started to deal with the aftermath with the other knights. But Klein said that he would definitely come to Will and the others later. As for the orc girl and Olga, they followed Klein's suggestion and left. Then, what will happen to us next? In the midst of the heated discussion, such a question was suddenly raised. They suddenly fell into silence. What will happen next? Will we be dealt with? Are you an idiot? At the very least, we did contribute, okay? And look at that motorcycle rider. He doesn't look like such a heartless person. Probably, maybe? Will shook his head and looked at the fear between his 2 companions. He slowly sighed. At this time, Ching Yiran sat alone at the bar, as if thinking about something. Next to him was the guitar that never left his side. This should be the first time he took out this guitar. Will thought to himself. Naturally, he did not think about the nature of this guitar, but he felt that Ching Yiran's ability to awaken Olga was a little mysterious. What are you thinking about? He came over with 2 glasses and a bottle of tequila. Nothing. Ching Yiran shook his head. I just want to be alone. Alcohol? Will shook the bottle. Give me a glass. Ching Yiran sighed and said with a smile. What will happen to us next? Will sat down. After a while, he whispered this question in a low voice. He was also thinking about this matter. But Ching Yiran suddenly thought of Zhong Luochen. Before he went abroad, he signed with Zhong Luochen's company. Later, he very willfully chose to go abroad for further study. He thought that Zhong Luochen would not agree, but he did not expect that Zhong Luochen did not oppose and even gave him a large sum of money for further study. It had been a while since he contacted this nominal boss. He did not know how he was doing recently, and how the thing he wanted to do was going. By the way, at that time, why did you seem to be fine? Ching Yiran suddenly looked at Will curiously and asked. At that time? Will was suddenly startled. Ching Yiran nodded. When they all became crazy, weren't you still sober? Will suddenly understood and then shook his head. I'm not very clear. At that time, my mind was also very chaotic. But I don't know why. It seemed that something suddenly calmed me down. I feel that this thing is protecting me. As he said, he took out a pendant from his pocket and placed it on the bar counter. Ching Yiran picked it up and glanced at it, and found that there was a button at the back of the pendant, so she curiously opened it. It turned out to be a small photo frame, but there was no photo inside. Actually, I opened it before, but there was no photo. Will shrugged. But Ching Yiran looked at a badge engraved inside and subconsciously said, Isn't this badge? It seems to be the badge of the royal family? Will seemed a little hesitant. As a pure citizen of the country of corruption, he naturally knew the origin of this badge. He was curious that this pendant was given to him by the orc girl as a return gift. But it should have nothing to do with the royal family, right? After all, she was an orc. He didn't know why, but it seemed to have suddenly started raining outside. The rain seemed to be washing everything in the city. The rain was even blown into the bar, and the slight mist floated to their faces, making them feel moist. Suddenly, it seemed that the whole world became quiet. Westminster Palace. The coronation ceremony didn't take long. After hearing the sound in the room, Dagonet and Orphan quickly opened the door and walked into the room. In the room, their adoptive mother, now the real Queen of Britain, sat alone in a chair and silently looked out of the window. There were 2 teacups. Dagonet couldn't help but frown. Your Majesty, let us in. Is there anything you need? Orphan was the first to speak. Her Majesty withdrew her gaze and smiled. When there are no outsiders, just call me Mother. I like it when you call me Mother. It sounds much better than the name Queen. Mother, are you worried about what will happen next? Orphan nodded and then hesitantly asked. Her Majesty shook her head, and after a moment of contemplation, she suddenly said, Dagonet, Orphan, there is something I want you to do in private. Go ahead, Dagonet said with rare seriousness. Her Majesty slowly sighed. Go and see your brother. Say hello to him for me. Also, tell him that he will continue to sit on the throne for a while. Finally, help him fix those extra nails. The 2 looked at each other and then nodded. Where's Lancelot? Her Majesty said with concern. I'm a bit worried about her. If she didn't destroy the Holy Grail, even if we were fully prepared, we might not succeed. Dagonet quickly said, she's in another room now. She needs treatment. But what about Lancelot's power? Her Majesty shook her head. About Lancelot's mysterious power, don't mention it in the future. Make it one of the most confidential information. Mother? Orphan couldn't help but be surprised. Her Majesty just smiled and said, A lady told me, as long as we pretend this never happened, we will have less trouble. A lady? The 2 couldn't help but be surprised. Was it the person the Queen saw before they came in? In one of the few rooms in the Palace of Westminster that were still intact. On the bed, covered by a pure white quilt, was the female knight, Lancelot, who had been unconscious since the destruction of the Holy Grail. Of course, there were people guarding the door. They were 2 superior knights who were lightly injured in this battle. However, what these 2 loyal knights didn't know was that in the room they were guarding, a stranger had already broken in. Miss Maid had been standing by the bed for 1 or 2 minutes. She looked at the sleeping Lancelot and seemed to be thinking about something. Suddenly, Miss Maid walked to the bedside and pressed her hand on Lancelot's forehead. A black light spot slowly merged into her body. After this, Lancelot's body began to float. A large amount of black fog gushed out from her body, and her body also disappeared bit by bit along with the black fog, until she finally disappeared. The black fog immediately began to gather again. Finally it took shape. It was still Lancelot's appearance, but now she was dressed like a noblewoman. Her hands were folded in front of her body. After waking up, she slowly opened her eyes. Different from Lancelot's facial paralysis under normal circumstances, this her was obviously much more expressive. At the same time, it was amazing to see her amazing beauty with these subtle expressions. "Long time no see, Miss Yi." Her face was like a peach blossom, and she smiled. "Eleanor, indeed it has been a while." Miss Maid nodded and then said expressionlessly, "Do you know why I forced you to wake up?" The Duchess of Aquitaine was puzzled at this time. As the person in charge of all the rewards and punishments of the Black Soul envoys, if you forced a black soul on vacation to wake up, it probably means that this vacation will be terminated? But I don't remember breaking the rules of vacation. So, forgive my ignorance, I really don't know. Have you forgotten what you did so quickly? Miss Maid said indifferently. Do you need me to remind you of what you did in the royal hall? Are you referring to the Holy Grail? Eleanor was surprised at this time. If my memory is not in chaos, then this Holy Grail is the owner's. Eleanor suddenly stopped and glanced at the servant girl. She chuckled and said, "It was bestowed to me by the previous empress to be used in that battle, right? Since it hasn't been taken back until now, then I should still have the right to use it. In other words, even if I destroy it, I should still have the right to use it. After all, it was already given to me, wasn't it? Even if it was given to you, it still belongs to the shop." Miss Maid said expressionlessly, "As the property of the shop. Even you exist as the property of the shop. Don't tell me you don't know how much extra income the Holy Grail can bring to the owner? In this way, can you still feel that you did nothing wrong?" The Duchess of Aquitaine narrowed her eyes and said with a smile that was not a smile, "How long have I been sleeping? Centuries. Has it been so long that you, who never cared about the profit and loss of the shop and never cared about the owner's transactions, began to care about these things? Or is it that the new owner is a little too prodigal, so there's not enough time?" Miss Maid showed a gentle smile and said softly, "Eleanor, I'm responsible for punishing and rewarding the Black Soul envoys. The highest limit of my authority includes extinguishing your life lamp from the Ark of the Covenant." The Duchess stopped smiling. When she looked at the servant girl, she was quite surprised. Then, she asked curiously, "It seems that we have an incredible new owner in our shop. So, are you going to summon me now?" "Master doesn't mean that." "You don't have to," Miss Maid said indifferently. "Well, you obviously flirted with me before. What a heartless person." The Duchess shook her head slightly regretfully. Then, under the kind gaze of Miss Maid, she walked back to the bed and sat down. She looked up at Miss Maid and said with a smile, "The loss of the Holy Grail can be deducted from my performance. If I remember correctly, I can still repay the loss of about 10 a Holy Grail. If there's nothing else, then I'll continue my vacation." Miss Maid didn't say anything until now. She just looked at the Duchess lying on the bed and listened to her last words before she closed her eyes. "I'm very happy to see you change after waking up temporarily. My good student, can you say hello to our new owner for me?" "That's just a memory of a subworld." The Duchess slowly closed her eyes. Her body turned into a black mist state and then returned to her original appearance of Lancelot. Miss Maid sighed slowly and looked at her, who had returned to the unconscious state. She walked forward and covered her with the blanket again. Well, the blanket seemed to be covering her a little too much. In the end it even covered her head. When Her Majesty saw Lancelot covered by the white blanket when Dagonite and Ophon arrived, she was shocked. Usually, this appearance could only be seen in the morgue. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. At this time, Dagonite's phone rang. He picked it up, grunted, and then said indifferently, "Okay, I got it. Send someone to catch him." After he put down the phone, he looked at Her Majesty and said, "Mother, Those who were detained in the myth of Doomsday have been rescued. I got it. Her Majesty nodded and didn't seem to be worried. She just carefully tidied up the blanket for Lancelot. Oh, Dagonite, is this your prank? You won't be able to find a woman you like this. It's too ungentlemanly. It's not me. Ophon looked at Dagonite in surprise. Mr. Clown changed into a crying face. It's really not me, Fog City. In a middle-class residence, the sound of chains being forcibly broken rang out. After the chain fragments made of Heimzite fell to the ground, it made a crisp sound. In the end, it was Catherine who unlocked the chain. At this time, she rubbed her wrist and then looked at the figure in front of her with dissatisfaction. The figure was wearing a gray-black robe and a mouthless mask, guardian of the royal family. I say, how long are you going to wear this mask? Hurry up and return my handsome Caesar to me, will you? The guardian of the royal family reached out and took off the mask on his face, revealing his original appearance. Caesar. Catherine screamed at this time and directly threw herself into his arms, then comfortably rubbed his chest. After a while, she looked up and said, "How was it? My acting in the auditorium was not bad, right? I really cried. How are you going to reward me?" Caesar just rubbed her hair and gave her a smile, then looked at everyone in the room. He bowed deeply to Judas and the others, then said softly, "This time, thank you for your hard work for my willfulness. Leader, you didn't do anything wrong." Judas smiled and said, "You have already told us what to do, so we will bear everything with you. Besides, compared to the original situation, now that the Queen has real power, it is more beneficial for us." Caesar was not too pretentious. He just nodded and then said, "Tomorrow, let's go back. There should be a meeting tomorrow night. I need to appear in front of those people early." "Leader, can we have a holiday?" Tipu's face was bitter. But in the next second, he was directly picked up by Judas and walked out of the room. After that, Dobas nodded to Caesar and Catherine. "Then, I will go to the shop. I hope it is not badly damaged." Soon, only Kate and Catherine were left in the room. At this time, Catherine stood on tiptoe, grabbed his head with both hands, and began to fiercely kiss him. The sound of panting began to sound. After a storm, Catherine had fallen asleep. Kate stood naked in front of the bed. After covering her with the quilt, he put on his nightgown and left the room, to the study room of this house. But to his surprise, or rather, his whole body tightened in an instant. He saw a person in the study room who did not belong here. Standing in front of the bookcase in the study room, holding a book in his hand and looking down. He heard Caesar push the door open and came in, so he closed the book. He said with a smile, "Sorry, I have been here for a while, but it seems that it is not the right time, so I have to wait here for a while." Caesar didn't disturb anyone in the room. He just casually walked in and then gently closed the door. His pair of eyes instantly turned into a resplendent amber gold color. "I don't mean any harm. You can just treat me as a salesman," he said softly. "Besides, it is better for your body not to continuously use power that does not belong to you, Mr. Caesar, or rather, Prince Caphra." The person who appeared in front of Caesar was the mysterious young man who claimed to be a passerby that he had met in the theater. #######PS1. The next chapter will be later. Chapter 13:21. Suddenly, it started to rain. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse just a while ago, or rather, they had just experienced a thrilling, doomsday-like horror. People walked on the streets and reached out to touch the drizzle that slowly fell. While feeling the rain wetting them, they seemed to have forgotten something. Such a scene could be seen everywhere on the streets of the entire Fog City, and within the city. People stared blankly at the sky in the rain, and then gradually lost their minds. Old people, men, women, children, and even pets. There seemed to be something shuttling in the rain, shuttling quickly. It was a figure in a black robe. They wandered to every corner of the city, holding magic wands that could enhance magic spells, and began to wave at the destroyed buildings and streets. Such a strange scene could be seen. The collapsed buildings and the broken materials began to float up little by little, and then quickly returned to their original positions. When the materials were reassembled, even if there were no cracks left, it returned to its original appearance. The damaged potholes on the streets began to be filled up. The damaged public facilities also began to gradually recover, as if they were self-repairing. A special spell called Restoration Spell was used. As for the one who released the spell, it was naturally the magician team that came this time. Hurry up! We need to repair the damaged parts of the city before sunrise. The person who commanded the magicians at this time transmitted the message to all the magicians. Don't worry about all the consumption. All the consumption of the secret crystals will be reimbursed by the Queen of Britain. Although we didn't participate in the battle this time, we have to let the British Knights see the ability of the Magician Association carefully. So, these figures shuttling through the streets and buildings sped up a little. In the streets, the secret crystals that had been used up to store magic power and turned into ordinary stones could be seen everywhere. Outside the window, it was drizzling. Occasionally, a black shadow could be seen flying in the distance. In the study, Caesar didn't really relax his tense state, but silently moved 2 steps closer. Last time it was a passerby, this time it's a salesman. What will it be next time? Caesar asked expressionlessly. The mysterious young man. Boss Luo said casually. To be honest, I don't know what it will be like the next time we meet. Maybe we won't even have the chance to meet again. Recently, I've gotten used to letting things happen naturally. Simply put, it's more up to fate. Suddenly, Caesar relaxed his body, and his tensed muscles began to relax. He slowly exhaled. Your Excellency, you're here in the middle of the night. I don't think you're really here to promote something. I don't think I need anything. Luoqiu smiled and said, There will always be some things that you and I need. As long as there are living beings, they will always act for something. If there really isn't, then it's probably a creature like, as long as I can sleep. About 4 hours ago, I received some notifications. Luoqiu looked at Caesar's furrowed brows and slowly said, The number of souls received included the souls of 1,000 pigs. To be honest, I was quite shocked. Suddenly, a thin layer of sweat appeared on Caesar's forehead. At this moment, it was as if there was a kind of darkness shrouding him. Even the whole world he saw, the darkness didn't really appear, it was just his feeling at this moment. You're the Holy Grail? Caesar's expression changed dramatically at this moment. Mr. Caesar, you have a sense of humor. Luoqiu smiled. However, strictly speaking, I do have some relationship with the Holy Grail that you know. Or rather, it can be said that it's something that I recently inherited. Well, it's a bit inappropriate to say that it's something that's currently under my name. This way, it'll be easier to understand. Yes. Caesar was silent for a while before he frowned and said, The origin of the Holy Grail is very mysterious. The Knight mechanism has always kept it a secret, but obviously, the Holy Grail is different from the cup that contained the blood of the saints that appeared in history. You are the one who made the Holy Grail? I'm not the one who made it. Boss Luo shook his head. But I have the ability to make it. Boss Luo stretched out his hand, and a ball of light appeared at the center of his palm. The Holy Grail that was destroyed by Lancelot in the royal hall was now slowly being restored in front of Caesar's eyes. When the last crack on the Holy Grail had disappeared, the aura that Kirin felt when he faced the Holy Grail hit him in the face once more. Luoqiu casually placed the Holy Grail on the desk in the study room. Caesar slowly took a breath, and his finger quietly pointed at the floor of the study room at this moment. His only plan at this moment was to warn everyone in the room and let them leave the room as soon as possible. He had already felt the difference in power. And it was a difference that couldn't be made up at all. Once he made a move, he might not even have the chance to make a move. Don't you like it? Unexpectedly, just as Caesar was about to warn them, Boss Luo stretched out his hand and tapped on the Holy Grail. At this moment, the Holy Grail directly disintegrated in front of Caesar again. Restoring the Holy Grail, destroying the Holy Grail, in less than 10 seconds, was as simple as kneading a ceramic embryo with clay. What happened in front of him at this moment had already made Caesar's thoughts stagnate. Or, actually, since he entered the door, some kind of illusion magic was cast on him? But the warning that he originally intended to give was stopped because of this. We don't want to believe that what happened in front of us is beyond our understanding. Although the Holy Grail directly disintegrated under Luocchio's finger, it didn't disperse. Instead, it maintained a state of scattered particles, as if it would gather again at any time. Boss Luo continued to speak. Just like tonight, the residents of Fog City also found it hard to believe what happened. They looked at you and you looked at the Holy Grail. It was the same. You? Why did you come to me? It wasn't that he didn't believe it. The first thing that came to his mind was that he might be under some kind of illusion magic, but it was also because of the inertia of his thoughts. In fact, he had already experienced how powerful the other party was. When he couldn't break that invisible barrier in the theater, he was already very clear about it. He didn't want to believe that the Holy Grail that was destroyed after a big battle could be so easily created and destroyed by the other party. It was also the reason why Tipu didn't want to believe that the Holy Grail was so powerful and used a defensive-type secret treasure as an explanation. But when faced with these lies and the truth in the end, he still chose the truth that he couldn't believe. His throat was a little dry as he asked the question in his heart. I'm really just here to sell. Luocchio smiled and said, I think you might need something for what you want to do in this life. You mean, the Holy Grail? After a moment of silence, Caesar couldn't help but frown. You don't want the Holy Grail. Luocchio shook his head. If you want the Holy Grail, you have too many chances to easily take it from Hopkins before he had time to make a wish to the Holy Grail. Why did you leave it until the end? Although the Holy Grail was destroyed in the process, which indeed caught the initiator of this plan, that lady and you a little off guard, but it's obvious that you want to see it destroyed. This kind of power shouldn't be left in this world, Caesar said seriously. How many Hopkins will appear again and again because of the Holy Grail? That's why I want to recommend something else to you. Luocchio smiled slowly. It's a place where you, the orcs behind you, and even the orcs you've been trying to help all your life, can walk openly under the sun and in front of people. What did you say? Caesar couldn't help but open his mouth. I'll let you experience it more directly. At this moment, Boss Luo smiled and then snapped his fingers in a relaxed manner. The world changed in an instant. The study room with soft orange light disappeared from Caesar's eyes in less than a blink of an eye. It was replaced by a lively and prosperous town. At this moment, he and Luocchio were standing on the city wall of this huge town. People in a hurry, streets in the style of the middle world, and all kinds of women, either wearing all kinds of strange armor or holding staffs in their hands, dressed like mages in fantasy. There were also beautiful people who carried bows and arrows on their backs, like the legendary elves in the legend. There were even orcs, who were either rough or petite, with obvious beastly characteristics, walking normally on the streets and casually chatting with others. This place. Caesar looked at everything in front of him emotionally. Among all kinds of people, there were demi-humans, and even orcs, the legendary elves. They walked freely on the street. They chatted and laughed, talking about all kinds of topics. In humans, they didn't mean to hide themselves. For him, at this moment, it was as if he had come to the legendary Eden. Welcome to the town of origin. Luoccio's voice sounded softly in Caesar's ears. I named this world, Izugrand World. This is a fantasy-style world, a real world created by me. In this place, even the orcs won't be suppressed or excluded, and humans won't be afraid of the orcs' existence. On the contrary, the orcs are a very popular race in the team here. Here, even a kingdom belonging to the orcs has begun to appear. Under the vast and almost infinite clear blue sky, a cool breeze swept over the city wall and blew Caesar's hair. He subconsciously put his hands on the fence of the city wall and looked down at everything below. I think, compared to what Mr. Caesar has been secretly doing all this time, what you want to achieve and change the current situation of the orc society may be more suitable here, Luaccio said softly, so I intend to sell it to you. Of course, the only drawback here is, there is no such thing as the internet for the time being, and the living standards vary according to different areas. The most advanced is probably the 40s and 50s of the last century. In addition, there is a slight suspicion of escape here. But, even if it's an escape, it's enough. Caesar turned around. It's really an irresistible promotion. It seemed that he had gone through a long journey. When he came back again, only 10 minutes had passed. The so-called salesman had left the study and left the room. And what he left for Caesar was only a certificate that allowed him to freely go to the Izu Grand world. Only those with orc blood could enter that world through it. First, you need to explain the situation of this world to every orc. Second, whether to go or not, it's not allowed to be decided by force. It needs to be decided by the orcs themselves. If you agree, go. If you don't, please eliminate everything you see. Third, you have a chance to show the Izu Grand world to each orc you choose. But at the same time, once an orc enters this world, he can't return here again. Fourth, once you die in this world, your soul will belong to me. And the words that he left behind. Izu Grand world. A world where we can live under the sun. Caesar sat at the desk, silently clenching the certificate in his hand, and fell into deep thought. The rain outside hadn't stopped yet. He was very clear about the effect of the rain. This was a spell called Memory Erasure, jointly released by the magician troupe. It would make the residents who had experienced the Fog City incident selectively forget about the orcs and all supernatural things. This was also the countermeasure that he had prepared at the beginning when he and the Queen planned this action. Suddenly, Caesar felt that he seemed to have done something that wasted his energy all these years. A deep sense of fatigue quietly came over him, in front of the certificate in his hand. He even had an impulse to go out and take a shower from the rain falling from the sky. But this level of memory erasure spell couldn't have an effect on the inhuman. Yes, even the weakest inhuman couldn't have an effect on it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't the voice of Judas, Tipu, or even Catherine. It was the voice of an old woman. It was the voice of a maid who had been in charge of the daily cleaning in this room. The voice of the most ordinary human. Mr. Davis, are you in there? Can I come in? Caesar slowly exhaled at this time, then his body and even his appearance began to age at this time. He was no longer handsome like a prince, but an ordinary man in his 40s. With the voice of this age, Caesar said slowly, "It's me. Come in." The maid pushed the door and came in. After seeing that it was really the owner of the house, Mr. Davis, she was relieved and then said, "I seemed to hear a sound here, so I came to have a look, afraid that it was a thief." "It's okay. I'm looking at the documents," Caesar said indifferently. "In addition, I'll end my vacation tomorrow and set off for Northern Ireland. Please take care of this place." "This is my job, I'll take good care of this house," the maid said respectfully. She couldn't not take care of it, because this house was bought by Mr. Davis, the Chief Minister of Northern Ireland, in Fog City for his holidays. She had worked here for more than 10 years. The Palace of Westminster was the first place to be repaired. On the sightseeing floor of the giant clock, called the Clock Tower of the Palace of Westminster, Luaccio was overlooking the city that was being repaired bit by bit. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and said, "The city is like a giant clock that is constantly turning. Everyone who lived here was a small part of it. Everyone has a role that can't be ignored. In this inhuman event, even ordinary people can play their role. It's a very fulfilling night, don't you think so? Boss Luo turned around. Behind him, Miss Maid walked slowly. Master, it seems that you had a good time tonight. After all, this time I was a good audience. Luocio smiled. How was it with your student? It felt like I was fooled by a naughty student? Miss Maid smiled faintly, but there was a rare gentleness in her eyes for outsiders. It should be a good time. Luocio smiled and then opened his palm. A colorful flower began to emerge from his palm. For you. The legendary pansy. Miss Maid naturally recognized it at a glance. Yes, although it's just a legend. Luocio handed the flower to Miss Maid, but it's good to turn the legend into reality. It was a real flower that naturally grew in violation of the law of nature. It was just that the time from creation to growth was accelerated. Keeping the pansy flower in front of her chest, Miss Maid lowered her head and smiled. Soon after, she looked up. Master, regarding the punishment for the destruction of the Holy Grail this time, the punishment has been issued. Eleanor has tactfully requested for compensation. Luocio nodded. When I checked the account book, she seemed to be your former maid? Do you want to increase her fine? Miss Maid said indifferently, I think you should increase it. You can immediately stop her vacation and let her return to work. Luocio just smiled. Although I haven't seen her personally, she was a senior who taught you for a period of time. I'll let it go this time. Besides, in the palm of his hand, the Holy Grail in a free state appeared and gathered together again. Luocio said casually, when the previous owner created this thing, it came with a self-healing ability. Since it's back, there's no problem. But it's a bit inappropriate to let it stay here. Master, are you going to put it back in the storage room? Miss Maid asked curiously. Let me think. Boss Luo pondered for a while, and then an idea came to him. He waved his hand and opened a door. The critical door. Boss Luo threw the Holy Grail in and said, the subworld is random. It will come with its own legend, and then it will be fought for. Why don't we call it the Holy Grail War? Miss Maid's gaze remained unchanged. Anyway, as long as the master was happy. Luocio suddenly said, by the way, the doomsday myth will disappear from this world little by little until it's completely erased. In this way, you don't have to stand on the dictionary as punishment. The rain stopped. The boss and the maid accompanied each other on the central tower until dawn. When the city was completely restored, the first ray of light began to move toward them from the end of the horizon. The pansy in her hand was bathed in the morning light and was dazzling. ########PS 15/30. Chapter 1322. After the city was repaired, there were no real scars left behind. The effect of the elimination spell was much better than expected. Of course, what happened in Fog City had already been published in the magic newspaper created by the Magician Association. In the dynamic newspaper headlines, there were even many scenes of the fierce battle that happened in Fog City last night. The vortex of discussion had quietly rolled up in the countries of Eurasia. In the Platinum Palace, it was already 9 o'clock the next morning. Her Majesty the Queen, accompanied by Dagonet and Orphan, received the leader of the magician team, Deacon Ace. Mr. Ace, this is your Holy Lance. Please check that it is intact. Inside the box was the Holy Lance, used by the Royal Guardian last night to defeat Hopkins. It was held by Dagonet. Deacon Ace's palm just casually swept over the box and smiled. I believe that Her Majesty the Queen is a respectable person who will keep her promise. The Queen said indifferently, about the cost of repairing Fog City, please make a detailed list. After verifying that there is no mistake, I will send someone to personally send it to your association. Then, about the mineral deposits in the northeast? Deacon Ace narrowed his eyes. He was more like a shrewd businessman than a magician. This was actually the most important thing. There were several exclusive materials in Britain. About this part of the matter, I will personally discuss it with the people in your association later, the Queen said with a smile. The deacon didn't say much. After nodding, he left with the Holy Lance. As for how the two sides would argue about the mineral deposits, it was a matter for the higher-ups. After Ace left, Her Majesty the Queen met with Gareth, Tresty, and Bedivere separately. The last person she met was Mr. Gareth. Before the duel last night, they had already pledged allegiance to the current royal family. No, to be precise, they only pledged allegiance to the current Queen and not to the current British royal family. Before this group of people at the round table pledged their allegiance, they actually left some room for maneuver. Gareth thought about the Queen's intention of meeting with the three of them alone. Unexpectedly, Her Majesty the Queen was very direct. What? At this moment, Mr. Gareth's face was full of disbelief. You want me to take over the night mechanism of Fog City? Tresty and Bedivere have already agreed to take over their respective night organizations. Her Majesty said seriously, You're the only one left, Gareth. Gareth frowned and said hesitantly, Your Majesty, there has never been a precedent in history for a Knight of the Round Table to take over an organization. The Queen said, If there is no such example, then it can't appear in the future. Gareth, are you willing to see the British knighthood once again fall into the hands of people like Sir Hopkins? Are you going to let me re-elect the Grand Secretary, and then command you? Or do you not have the confidence to do a good job, Gareth? That's not what I mean. Mr. Gareth shook his head. At this time, he naturally understood the intention of letting the 12, who had already pledged their loyalty to each, take over different night mechanisms. For Knights of the Round Table who had inherited the power of inheritance like them, once they had made an oath, they would not betray the Queen. Letting them take over the knightly organization was equivalent to consolidating Her Majesty's control over the knightly organization. I just don't understand. Why me? Gareth smiled bitterly and said, To be honest, I didn't play much of a role in the whole thing. I wasn't like Lancelot, who destroyed the Holy Grail, and I wasn't like Dagonet, who carried out the undercover work. Gareth. Her Majesty smiled at this time. I originally intended to let Dagonet take over the knightly organization of Fog City. But he recommended you to me. Dagonet recommended me? Ignoring Gareth's surprise at this time, Her Majesty directly signed a document. Gareth, I have written the document of your appointment. I hope that your future work will make me feel that this recommendation will not disappoint. Are you still planning to not take it? What else could he say? The document was already written. Taking a deep breath, Gareth cautiously took the appointment. Then, the matter of discussing how to rebuild the knightly organization will be temporarily handed over to you, Tresty, and Bedivere to coordinate. I believe that if the three of you can work together, there will be a very good start, right? I will do my best. After saluting, Gareth took the mission document and left the Queen's office, feeling a little unreal. As soon as he came out, he let out a long sigh. Her Majesty seemed to be a completely different person from before. He even felt more reserved when facing her than when facing Sir Hopkins. But at this time, he saw that outside the corridor, someone was leaning against the wall as if waiting for him to come out. The clown Dagonet. Gareth was silent for a while and finally walked to Dagonet. He hesitated and said, Before I came here, I went back to Hopkins Manor. I found Geraint, a few cabinet elders, and others in the place where the prisoners were held. They didn't die at all. Mr. Clown narrowed his eyes at this time. Even if you found them, except for Geraint and some of the knights, those cabinet elders won't be released. Of course, it's the same for their loyal ones. Her Majesty won't so easily return the situation that has already been opened to those old guys again. They will spend the next few days leisurely. Why? Gareth lowered his head. Dagonet was startled, then he shrugged and said, Are you talking about recommending you to take over the Knights of Fog City? Didn't I say, Gareth, you are more suitable for these trivial things than me? Are you going to let me sit in the office and sign documents? Maybe my signature will be different every time. Gareth grabbed Dagonet's collar with one hand and pulled him in front of himself. I say, why did you lie to me that you killed so many people, killed Geraint? Did I lie to you? Mr. Clown had a fearful expression on his face. I remember reminding you about this. Gareth couldn't help but be startled. Mr. Clown shook his head. I say, Gareth, can you have some confidence in me? I made a knight's oath in front of King Arthur's statue. I said this sentence, didn't I? Who knew you were referring to this at that time? Gareth pinched Dagonet's neck with both hands and was furious. Mr. Clown looked like he was about to suffocate. But he suddenly let go of his hand, looked at Dagonet, who couldn't stop coughing, and sighed. It's not you, it's really great. Gareth, Mr. Clown suddenly put on a bright smile and said slyly, are you feeling very guilty towards me? Are you blaming yourself for not trusting your companions? It's okay, for the next year, you can contribute your salary to me, so my wounded heart will be well healed. Get out. Mr. Gareth strode away. Half a year? Mr. Clown hurriedly chased after him and hooked his shoulder. Get out? 3 months. Go to hell. 1 month, okay? I'm running out of flying knives recently. The voices gradually faded away from the corridor. When Her Majesty came out of the office, she only saw the backs of the two people before they disappeared. At this time, a servant came to Her Majesty and told her that Lancelot had woken up. Later, Lancelot was transferred to Platinum Palace for treatment. When Her Majesty walked into the room, Lancelot was sitting on the bed silently, looking at her hands, seeming to be absent-minded. My queen. Hearing the sound, she immediately wanted to get down from the bed. Her Majesty waved her hand and said with a smile, I'm not stupid enough to let a patient bow to me. No. Lancelot hurriedly said, You're the wisest queen I've ever seen. I've heard about what happened yesterday. I didn't expect so many things to happen, and I've been kept in the dark. I'm sorry. I didn't do anything, and even let someone take away my holy seal. I don't deserve the name Lancelot to do the lake anymore. Her Majesty came to the bedside and sat down, suddenly saying, Do you remember what I said to you when you and I were trapped in the stone room? Lancelot nodded subconsciously. Her Majesty said, Now, my hands have been released from your eyes, and the light has come. Don't you want to prepare yourself? Lancelot moved her lips and whispered, But now I'm all ready. This is what the Guardian found from Oberon's body after eliminating him. Her Majesty handed a box to Lancelot. I think it belongs to you. When the box was opened, a soft light shone on Lancelot's face. It was the Holy Seal of Lancelot du Lake. Lancelot lowered her head and stared blankly at the Holy Seal floating in the air, and then it automatically integrated into her body little by little. She was originally the rightful inheritor of this power. When the disrupted inheritance rights were restored to the right track, the Holy Seal obeyed the ancient oath and returned to her body again. Am I still qualified? Lancelot muttered to herself, but she suddenly felt something pressing down on her head. She opened her mouth in surprise. The thing pressing down on her head was a book. It was the book put down by Her Majesty. Her Majesty squinted her eyes and smiled. If you still can't forgive yourself, why don't you try to punish yourself? Hold this book and don't let it fall down for a whole day. If you fail, you have to eat 100 strawberry sundaes within an hour. What do you think? I'll do it. Lancelot took a deep breath. She carefully got down from the bed and looked at the book on top of her head. If it was only balancing, it was not too difficult for her to do so with the training she had been doing all this time. By the way, stand up straight. You have to be like a lady. Remember, you're a lady now, not a knight. Her Majesty said with a smile, Don't be so tense, relax. Yes, relax a little more. Is that so? Lancelot couldn't help feeling a little unnatural. Well, it's almost done. Her Majesty smiled and looked at Lancelot's standing posture with satisfaction. Then she suddenly said, "By the way, Lancelot, are you interested in being my student?" "Pa!" Because it was too sudden, the book that had been balanced very well fell from Lancelot's head just like that. It seems that the chefs have to work overtime. Her Majesty suddenly covered her mouth and laughed. When Mr. Davis, led by the guard, came to the Queen's office, he was a little surprised to see a woman in a white tuxedo shirt with a book called Confession on her head. "Mr. Davis, Her Majesty is waiting for you inside, please come in," Lancelot said expressionlessly. "I remember your name is Lancelot?" Mr. Davis nodded. "Yes." Lancelot didn't nod. "She just blinked. Last year, when the Queen visited Northern Ireland, we met once at a local banquet. So you still remember?" Mr. Davis nodded and then smiled. "Thank you for your hard work during this period." Lancelot was a little surprised. But her expression was as usual. After Davis walked into the Queen's office, she continued to stand in front of the door and perform her guard duty. In the room, Her Majesty personally made a pot of tea for Davis. They looked at each other for a while in the discussion area next to the office. "I'm leaving at noon. I have a meeting in the afternoon." "Mr. Davis," Caesar said slowly at this time, "you took a long leave this time. Actually, you can continue to stay for a while." Her Majesty said slowly, "The previous Prime Minister is dead. I need someone to help me." Caesar said indifferently, "Elizabeth, I've been operating in Northern Ireland for more than 10 years. Over the years, I've been secretly arranging for the orcs to live there with new identities. In fact, it's enough. You should understand that I have little interest in the so-called power of the British government." "That's a pity." The Queen laughed bitterly. "I know I can't make you stay by my side. It's already beyond my expectations that you're willing to help me this time. In fact, at first, I didn't even think that you would agree to help me. After all, some orcs need to be sacrificed this time. But I need this effect." Caesar said expressionlessly, "The incident in Fog City has begun to spread among the non-humans in Eurasia. In the next period of time, the anti-orc voices will intensify again. The living environment of the orcs on Eurasia will become more difficult. Only in this way will they have the courage to find new opportunities. Elizabeth, do you know? There are at least 740,000 orcs in the world now. But I've only settled 30,000 in Northern Ireland so far. They still don't have the courage to take this step." Her Majesty shook her head. "If there's a need, please don't hesitate. If you need political support, I'll do my best." "Thank you." Caesar nodded directly without being too pretentious, then stood up. "Then I'll take my leave. If I'm not wrong, you should go to the Magician Association to negotiate with them in person, right? When the time comes, the guardian of the royal family will appear by your side again. You're always so reassuring." Her Majesty sighed. "No wonder Margaret loves you so much." After a moment of silence, Caesar said, "I'm leaving, take care of yourself." Her Majesty suddenly said, "Caesar, can I see Margaret's 2 children? After all, they're my nephews." "You'll see them soon, probably." At noon, accompanied by Miss Maid, Luaccio came to the door of a small shop that looked quite secretive. This place was found according to the address given by a certain lady. Lady Maria's Magic House. Genius memorized this address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website, M. Chapter 1323. When the magician troupe went to Britain, the route was rather secretive in order not to attract attention. Naturally, the transportation they chose was not very comfortable. For these magicians, such a journey was naturally disdainful. But it was different when they returned. Since they had completed their work, they naturally wouldn't choose those narrow and bumpy tools. The Queen specially booked a whole plane for them, and the person in charge of sending them off this time was Mr. Bedivere, who had just become the head of Edinburgh's night organization a few hours ago. He was chatting with Deacon Ace in the car. Pansy. When he heard this name, Deacon Ace's expression was obviously a little unnatural. He frowned and muttered, "Mr. Bedivere, why did you suddenly mention this name?" Bedivere was familiar with most of the famous magicians in the British Empire, but he was unfamiliar with the couple he met last night, even though they claimed to be freelance magicians. After that, Bedivere suddenly remembered something. That was, from the beginning to the end, no one knew the name of the mysterious young man who injected a huge amount of magic into the compound spell. It was as if no one had ever thought of this question. As for the pansy, he only knew about it from Klein's introduction at the beginning. Later, after a simple conversation with Klein, Bedivere found out that it was indeed Klein's first time meeting this man and woman. "Yes, I only heard of this name by chance, so I was a little curious," Bedivere said slowly. "Mr. Ace seems to know the owner of this name?" Deacon Ace shook his head and looked at the new head of Edinburgh's night organization with suspicion. "There is actually nothing to hide about the pansy. As long as you ask around, it is very easy to find out from the magic world. Have you heard of the title, Legendary Witch?" Bedivere was startled and said, "Could it be that the pansy is this legendary witch? I have heard of this legend. One of the few top secret pharmacists in the world, and she is also free. Legend has it that when she was certified as a secret apothecary, she solved a problem that had existed for centuries in the history of secret apothecaries in a single day and successfully created a perfect 6-star potion. Thus, on the day she completed her certification, she was given the certificate of the highest level of secret apothecary. Later on, because of her temperament, she was called the Legendary Witch. Most people know about this, and the title of Legendary Witch is much more widespread than her original name." Deacon Ace nodded and said, "But if you're a secret pharmacist, you would know the name Heptagon. However, she has been missing for more than 30 years. It's normal that Mr. Bedivere doesn't know about her." Bedivere asked, "Mr. Ace, have you seen this legendary witch?" Deacon Ace shook his head, as if he was at a loss for words. He sighed and said, "If possible, I would rather have never seen it. Really, Mr. Bedivere, I advise you to not get involved with the legendary witch. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Bedivere couldn't help but frown. "However," Deacon Ace sighed, "let me show you something." With that, Deacon Ace slowly lifted his clothes, revealing his abdomen and chest. Bedivere's expression couldn't help but change slightly. Your body, as a surgeon, Bedivere found it hard to imagine what he was seeing. Because the part below Deacon Ace's neck couldn't be called a human body at all. Instead, it was directly made with various instruments, surgical engravings, artificial organs, and crystals. Although all the parts could be seen that they were arranged to imitate the internal organs of the human body very well. "This is my current body." Deacon Ace smiled bitterly and said, "Now, these organs and their annual maintenance cost is a huge consumption. The reason why my body became like this is only because I once used my body to exchange for a bottle of potion from the legendary witch. To be honest, I actually regret my original choice." "Why did she take away your body?" Bedivere asked, puzzled. Mr. Ace shook his head. "Instead of saying why she took away my body, it's better to say, among the price of asking her to help, this is the only thing I can afford. So, it's best not to get involved with the legendary witch, because you will always be unable to resist the temptation she brings to you. Then, you will lose it, and you will even regret it in the future." Bedivere suddenly asked, "What does this legendary witch look like?" Deacon Ace gave him a strange look. Bedivere said calmly, "If we don't know the appearance of such a dangerous person, it will make people feel uneasy. No one knows what she looks like," Deacon Ace said, "because she never shows her true face. So, no one can find her in the 30 years she has been missing. Perhaps she is by your side, but you and I never know." Bedivere nodded, but he was thinking about something else. However, Klein's words couldn't prove that the pansy he mentioned was the legendary witch. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a good thing to have such a dangerous person in Britain. It didn't take long for the car to arrive at the airport. After personally sending all the members of the magician troupe onto the plane and watching the plane take off and disappear, Bedivere left the airport. Maria Holick, the name of the magic house in front of him, gave him the feeling when he first met the club. Of course, the nature was naturally completely different. The only similarity was probably that they were both opened on the busy road. In addition, only inhumans could see through the disguise on the surface. In fact, it was a laundry in a relatively quiet place on this busy road. It was a little different from last night. When Luaccio and Miss Maid walked into the laundry, Ms. Maria was holding a large pile of clothes to be dry cleaned. As for the laundry area, there was only a middle-aged woman sitting and reading a magazine, waiting to take out the clothes in the washing machine. Today, Ms. Maria was wearing a work apron. Compared to last night's slightly dusty appearance, she seemed to be younger. Perhaps it was because the makeup she wore last night was more mature? She looked like a different person. You are. When Maria saw Luaccio, she was stunned at first and then said, "Are you two going to wash clothes?" Luaccio only felt a little strange. At this time, Maria didn't seem to know him. But he didn't remember that he had erased his existence from her perception. The rain of elimination spell before dawn shouldn't have made her lose this part of her memory. But the doubt only lasted for a moment. Luaccio quickly smiled and said, "We are here to see Ms. Maria. If it's convenient, can you please let her come out? By the way, how should I address you?" "Looking for my sister?" Ms. Maria in front of him frowned. Luaccio took out a card. After taking a look at the card, she said with a look of realization, "Are you her guests? I don't think I have seen you before." "You can say that I just met her," Luaccio said casually. "So, are you in a hurry?" "If you are not in a hurry." She nodded, then her eyes fell on the woman in the laundry area, and said with some embarrassment, "This lady is a regular customer of mine." "It's okay." Luaccio smiled. "In this case, can you two go inside and wait for a while?" she said, pointing to a door leading inside, indicating that they could go in directly. "I'll be there soon." After a while, after the laundry customer took the clothes, she directly hung a sign on the door of the laundry shop, and then came to Luaccio and Miss Maid. The laundry shop was connected to the living place, about half of the space. The living place was a bit simple, but relatively clean. Miss Maid seemed to be more satisfied with this environment. It was rare that she didn't wipe the chair before her master sat down. "My sister just came back this morning and then fell asleep. She seemed a little tired. She didn't tell me that there would be new guests coming to see her. Maybe she was too tired and forgot?" She served tea and then quickly said, "Please wait a moment, I'll call her. She's about to wake up." Then it was a rather magical scene. Ms. Maria sat down and then her head suddenly dropped. When she looked up again, she yawned and stretched. Her big breasts supported the apron on her body, which could bring vitality to people. Then she showed a slightly frivolous smile. This was the witch Luaccio met Maria. Sorry, I was too tired when I came back this morning. I didn't think about anything and fell asleep directly. I didn't have time to tell her that you came back." Ms. Maria looked bitter at this time. "And little brother, you suddenly disappeared again. I thought I was being molested. Why does the air suddenly seem to be colder?" Ms. Maria suddenly shivered, but she couldn't find the source. The two people in front of her, well, they are boys with such a healing smile. As for the woman next to them, she also has a kind look. So strange? Did someone secretly cast a bad spell on me? While she was thinking, she heard Luaccio ask curiously, "Ms. Maria, are you sharing a body with your sister?" "Because of some reasons, I can only live in Teresa's body temporarily," Maria said rather casually. "Oh, by the way, Teresa is this child's name. Let's not talk about this for now. Is this the legendary witch, Heptil?" "Legendary witch?" Boss Luel looked at his maid-cum-girlfriend and blinked. Ms. Maid said indifferently. Probably some busybodies made it up when they were bored. I have never admitted it. I feel like I know more about you. Luocchio smiled. Ms. Maid looked at him, and her eyes suddenly softened. So dazzling, Ms. Maria, who felt like she was about to be blinded by the dazzling light, suddenly felt hurt. She coughed lightly and said seriously, Gentlemen, why don't we talk in my magic house first? No matter what, it's not suitable to talk here. As she spoke, she knocked on the table, and a small magic wand about a foot long, like a conductor's baton, appeared in her palm. Then, she lightly tapped on one of the walls of the house with this magic wand. On the white wall painted with latex paint, neat cracks appeared in an instant. It was the common pattern of the eye-shaped bricks. Then, the bricks on the wall began to fold in a regular pattern. Finally, what appeared in front of them was an oval entrance. Maria walked in first. Come in, welcome to Maria Holick, guest. It was a bit like walking into a haunted house, but there was no strange smell. On the contrary, there was a light lavender fragrance in the air. It wasn't big, about 60 square meters. The surroundings were messy, but in fact, there were all kinds of strange objects and even creatures neatly placed. For example, a frog with slicked back hair and a cigar in its mouth. On the wall, there was a ribbon-shaped fish pond. A purple oncong fish was swimming slowly, opening its mouth from time to suck in the surrounding microorganisms. By the way, this oncong fish emitted a green light. It was a bit like a tourist entering an aquarium for the first time. Before Boss Luo sat down, he actually spent some time observing the strange things here. Meanwhile, the servant girl was carefully explaining the things here to her master. Her level of detail made Ms. Maria, who was about to show off her skills as a merchant in the magic house, feel a sense of defeat. Then, let me formally introduce myself. Maria coughed lightly again. I'm Maria, a freelance magic merchant. It's nice to meet you too. Especially, I can see the legendary Pansy. It's really an honor. Although she said that, in fact, this witch was very nervous. After all, she was facing the legendary witch. You must hold on, Maria. You must not let the legendary witch look down on you. Smile naturally, don't be nervous. Ms. Maria, do you feel hot? Yes, I suddenly feel a bit hot. It's so hot, don't you think? Ha ha. Maria laughed, then pulled open her collar and fanned herself. Her rather deep cleavage was revealed again. Then, this witch instantly felt as if she had entered the South Pole. A chill rushed from the soles of her feet to the top of her head, and then from the top of her head to the soles of her feet, circulating back and forth several times. Achoo! The two people in front of her. Well, they were still boys with such a healing smile. As for the legendary witch beside them, she still had a kind gaze. So strange? Chapter 13:24. Miss Maria, let's get to the point. Miss Maid suddenly said, I heard that you're going to buy my potions, right? Before coming here, Miss Maid had already heard the general situation from her master. So, she naturally got Luoccio's permission to speak at this time. Otherwise, with her usual style, she wouldn't have spoken before Luocchio spoke. And Boss Luo wanted to see how she dealt with magicians when she was a pharmacist. Hearing that, Maria was suddenly energized. Strangely, the chill came and went quickly. But this didn't mean that she could enter into the negotiation mode immediately. She didn't even think that the legendary witch could get to the point so easily. She even thought that both sides would need some time to beat around the bush. But considering the rumors about the legendary witch, she was moody and acted strangely, so it was understandable. Yes, Master Pansy. Master. This was the name given to the magicians at the top of the pyramid in the magic circle. After all, secret potions were also a branch of magic. There were only a few top-secret potioneers in the world, so it wasn't rude to call them master. Then, you should know my rules, Miss Maid said calmly. Maria nodded at this time, and then said nervously, I'll provide the materials, and it's double. In addition, I need to agree to Master's request. If the first request can't be fulfilled, then I'll need to add another double, with different requests. If the additional double request can't be fulfilled, then it will become Master's private property. If I remember correctly, this should be it? Mademoiselle Maria knows very well. The servant girl smiled, and her smile was like an angel's. Of course. Maria suddenly became very energetic. I'm a big fan of Master. I've read all the legends about you. I can recite them backwards. You're my idol for life, okay? She was a super rich woman who could sell a bottle of secret potions for 300,000 secret crystals, and she was the richest woman in the magic circle for many years. But I have a new rule now. Miss Maid smiled like an angel. New rules? Maria's expression immediately darkened. The servant girl smiled and took out a craft paper bag, the kind used to store bread when buying bread. Then she poked 2 holes in it and said with a smile, I'm now used to letting the client wear this mask to talk to me until the commission is completed. Maria was stunned at first, then she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Miss Maid's angelic smile became more and more charming as she held the newly made cover. Ahahaha, this little thing looks really unique. Maria let out a hollow laugh and gulped. She then took the craft paper bag. Isn't it just for carrying this thing? By the way, you can't take it off before the commission is completed, Miss Maid said softly, no matter when you are eating, bathing, or sleeping. I have never been able to take it off. Are you a devil? The commission, do you still want to continue? The servant girl asked with a smile. Maria took a deep breath as if she had made a major decision. She gritted her teeth and put the paper bag over her head. No matter what kind of beauty she was before, she was only left with a pair of eyes at this moment. It was greasy, and there were bread crumbs inside. This is too much. Master Hepton, are you satisfied now? Maria asked in a stiff tone. Miss Maid said expressionlessly, Okay, Miss Maria, we can continue to talk about the secret medicine. The rules are still the same as before. Your request will be customized according to your commission. Can you remove the surname, mask? Maria asked with grief and indignation. Miss Maid, who had learned the Luaccio style of ignoring from her master, said softly, Miss Maria, what's the commission about? After all, they had really gotten to the point. Maria had no choice but to convince herself not to mind the current situation. Although the greasy paper bag was really uncomfortable, she took a deep breath and inhaled the breadcrumbs into her nose. However, she couldn't take off the paper bag. She could only endure the discomfort and said, I want to ask the master to make a fertility potion. Fertility potion? Ms. Maid opened her mouth slightly in surprise. Then, she turned her head to look at Maria and said calmly, Logically speaking, you should still have the ability to reproduce. Besides, even if you have some hidden illness, according to the current development of secret medicine, isn't the fertility potion a very common thing? Why did you specially ask me to make it? Because I need the fertility potion to be able to work on the giant dragon. Maria's voice sounded a bit low, probably because of the paper bag. Master Pansy should know this, right? Giant dragons had a very strong resistance to magic. They were basically immune to secret potions of 4 stars and below, while secret potions of 5 stars would also have most of their effects nullified. Only secret potions of 6 stars and above could, in theory, have an effect on giant dragons. In fact, the fertility potion of the secret medicine has never exceeded 4 star. I wonder if Master Pansy can make a perfect 6-star fertility potion? You didn't say anything, as if she was thinking about something. Boss Luo rested his chin on his hand and watched the changes in Miss Maid's expression without saying anything. As time passed, Maria was so nervous that she was about to lose all hope. Clearly, she also felt that even the Heptalus couldn't make a perfect 6-star fertility potion. After all, even the two masters in the secret art tower, who were on the same level as the Heptalus, said that 5-star was the limit of the fertility potion, and it was impossible to improve it. She only came to her to give it a try. Finally, Miss Maid said, "As far as I know, there aren't many giant dragons in this world. The fertility potion you want me to make is for that person. Does it matter?" Maria froze for a second. Yi said calmly, "There are differences among the giant dragon's physiques. If you don't know which type it is, you can't make the most accurate comparison. Or you just need a bottle of perfect 6-star fertility potion. And you don't care if it works or not. It doesn't matter. The price. Relatively speaking, the requirement may be simpler." Maria said subconsciously, "Prescribing the right medicine? I understand. What? Can you really make it?" "Which giant dragon is it?" Miss Maid asked directly. Maria took a deep breath. She gave up taking a deep breath and said quickly, "Fafnir." Luocchio asked curiously, "Fafnir? There really is one. However, this legendary giant dragon seems to have been killed in the myths, right?" Maria looked at Luocchio. She felt as if she had been healed. Then she explained, "Little brother, the dragon you mentioned was indeed slaughtered, Achu. The present one is actually its descendant and the only adult golden dragon left in the world. But for some reason, it lost the ability to reproduce. Now, the magic creature department is racking their brains on this matter, but they can't do anything about it. Fafnir's fertility problem has become a century-old problem in the magic world. If Fafnir can't reproduce, then it is very likely that the golden dragon species will be completely extinct from the world." "So," Boss Luo blinked, "it turns out that these legendary creatures also have various problems. Is it strange?" Maria said naturally, "Because of the unadaptability to environmental changes, not to mention the magic creatures, even ordinary creatures are directly extinct every year. According to the statistics of the magic world, 2 to 3 kinds of creatures will disappear every year." "Little brother. Achu! Don't you watch the news?" Luocchio thought for a while and said, "I haven't watched it for a while." He remembered that when he was in South America, the vampire prince once gave him a creature similar to a postman, but it had been shelved for a while. But he still quite agreed with the dynamic newspaper established by the Magician Association. "Miss Maria, it seems that the Magician Association should offer a large reward for solving this problem." Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes. Maria said at this time, "Master shouldn't be interested in these bounties. After all, if you were, you would have taken action earlier. Compared to these bounties, what I know is that you seem to prefer the client to complete your request. So, what is your request?" Miss Maid said, "So, your request is to solve Fafnir's fertility problem, not the fertility potion. After all, from your description, we can't determine the specific reason for Fafnir's fertility problem. Isn't it over if it can give birth? Who cares what kind of hidden disease it is?" Maria said subconsciously. However, she suddenly remembered that the legendary witch seemed to be a perfectionist, so she hurriedly changed her words. "Of course. If it can completely solve Fafnir's fertility problem, of course it will be the best." "Then you go and prepare, Miss Mask." Miss Maid nodded directly. "You should have the coordinates here, right?" This time, she even omitted the name. "This is too much, Maria." She sighed, nodded, then stood up and said, "Then I'll go and prepare now. Please wait here for a while." Watching Maria walk into the room further inside the magic house, Luocchio asked curiously, "When did you buy the bread?" "Before going abroad." Miss Maid smiled and said, "Master, have you forgotten? Didn't we go to a bakery together the day before?" "Really?" Luocchio smiled and immediately asked curiously, "The coordinates you mentioned just now?" Miss Maid said, "It's a common non-human realm in Europe and even the entire Western world. Or should I say it's a space for activities? The specific structure is a world fragment. If you're in it, you don't have to worry about using non-human power. Luocio was even more curious. If that's the case, why don't non-human people choose to live in it all the time? It shouldn't be much different from the real world, right? It's not the same. Miss Maid explained. A lot of energy is needed to maintain this realm, and the Magician Association is the organization that manages this realm. So every non-human who stays in the realm needs to pay a certain amount of secret crystals, according to the length of time, to maintain the daily consumption of this realm. But if you live in the real world, as long as you don't expose yourself, there won't be any problems in this regard. Therefore, for the lower and middle-class non-humans, it's more economical to stay in the real world. Of course, there are naturally more rules to abide by in the real world. While speaking, Maria had walked out again and said, "Sorry for the long wait. The coordinates are ready, please come with me. But, can I ask you two for a favor?" "Please go ahead," Luocio said casually. Maria said seriously, "You also know that the relationship between Britain and Europe is not very harmonious. Last year, the Magician Association closed all the official coordinates in Britain, which is a kind of sanction. So, we won't tell anyone, Miss Maria. Don't worry." Luocio nodded. "Then, come with me." Maria turned around and walked to a fireplace. Then, she took out a bag and sprinkled a pile of green powder into the fireplace. The fire instantly burned and then rolled into a twisting whirlpool. At this moment, half of Maria's body had already walked into the whirlpool. Then, she waved at Luocio and Yu Yi. "Because this is an illegal coordinates, the landing place may be a little remote. You'd better be mentally prepared. Could this be the legendary pheasant car? In a certain seaside city in the Aegean Sea. Pure white houses lined up neatly and strangely at the edge of the coast. The city scenery, which was completely different from that of China, made a certain girl constantly exclaim, 'Wow' and 'amazing.' 'Sister Long, look!' and so on. An elementary school autumn outing, this is." Looking at the excited butterfly demon, the Shinryu of Kelowna shook his head. "Don't go too far. Be careful not to get lost, I won't look for you." "I know." Long Shirua smiled helplessly. Then, she walked into an alley and entered a shop that sold fishing tools. Seeing that there were no other customers in the shop, the Shinryu of Kelowna directly said to the staff at the counter, "2 tickets to the inhuman territory, thank you. What's the exchange rate of demonic energy crystals to secret crystals?" 0.89, 1 ma'am. Give me 5,000 units of demonic energy crystals. Long Shirua thought for a while and then said casually, "Also, give me a newspaper, and I want to rent a messenger." "Okay. This is your newspaper. I'll prepare the secret crystals for you right away. Please wait a moment." The Shinryu of Kelowna sat down and began to read the newspaper. After switching between Chinese and simplified Chinese on the upper right corner of the newspaper, he lit a cigarette and began to read. "What the hell? The Knights of the Round Table fought against the Orcs? The Queen of Britain is the big winner?" The Shinryu of Kelowna shook his head. "Nonsense." The Shinryu of Kelowna, who was smoking, simply flipped through the newspaper casually. Then, his eyes stopped on a small column on a page. The title was, Biling. "Today, Miluo-chan will teach you how to capture the person you like and explain the love fortune of the 12 constellations this week." The Shinryu of Kelowna sneered. "Childish. Sister Long, are you done?" The butterfly demon came back. "Luo dance. How many times have I told you, don't suck your fingers while walking? Hurry up and put away your honey pot. Do you want to be a fat butterfly that can't fly and wait for someone to roast you until you're fried? Huh. ######## PS. 16/30. Genius remembers this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 1325. The train shuttled through the darkness, the lights flashing by the tracks like flickering lights. The roar of the train was deafening in the tunnel for a long time. After a long time, the spirit witch removed her hands from her ears and frowned. She had been in this dark place for most of the day, perhaps even longer. Her patience had even worn out, but Farrell still had not woken up from a certain state. He had been hiding in this place for a long time, ever since Farrell had suddenly left last night. If she had not seen with her own eyes how Farrell broke out of the island prison and beat up 3 knights of the Round Table in an invincible manner, as well as how powerful he was in the first half of the royal hall, she would have found it hard to believe that the man in front of her was the legendary man she had released from prison. At this moment, Farrell curled up his body and kept muttering something. Sometimes he panicked, sometimes he trembled. His nerves were so sensitive that they were on the verge of breaking down. This can't go on. The spirit witch became more and more distressed. She still needed to rely on this man to help her find the Acacia record. Obviously, she did not want to wait for Farrell to calm down. Finally, the witch gritted her teeth and approached Farrell. She held his cheeks with both hands and pressed her forehead against his. She tried to use her power to wake Farrell up. As long as she could find the source of any mental disorder, the spirit witch had the ability to set things right. "What are you afraid of?" The whisper sounded like a spell, but also like an ancient language that gently sounded in Farrell's ears. "Perhaps you need someone to talk to. Open up your mind for a while, Farrell." Just as her consciousness began to move stealthily and was about to touch the depths of the man's heart, the witch suddenly fell to the ground in pain. Her consciousness seemed to have been burned by endless flames. The pain that came from the depths of her soul made her instantly pale and sweat dripped down her back. But at this moment, Farrell stopped his abnormal behavior. It seemed like he had woken up, or he had calmed down. "Don't try to pry into my heart." Farrell looked at Miss Ji-Lien and said expressionlessly, "If there is one more time, I will personally send you off from this world." "Is this how you treat people who have helped you?" Miss Witch could not help but feel angry. Fortunately, she was the one who had calmed him down. "I didn't ask you to do that." Farrell stood up again and began to tidy up his somewhat messy clothes as he left. "Old man, where are you going this time?" The witch couldn't be bothered to argue with the old man and quickly got up. "They're back. I can't stay idle anymore." Farrell didn't even turn his head. "I have to make preparations in advance. I hope I can still make it in time." "Them?" Miss Witch couldn't help but be startled. She vaguely remembered that Farlier had said something similar before. "They, who are you referring to?" "It's a calamity," Farlier said in a low voice. "It's a group of people who play with everyone in the palm of their hand. If we don't resist, we will only become their food. I really don't know if you're awake now, or if you've just turned from a lunatic to a psychopath. Go as far as you can. It's best if you can stay away from the West. You promised to help me find the Acacia record. If I don't die this time, I will fulfill my promise to you." "Old man, why don't you die?" Miss Witch angrily said. "You ungrateful bastard who bullies women." Her voice echoed in the train tunnel, but Miss Witch couldn't see Farrell anymore. She immediately stomped her feet and said resentfully, "Don't think of going back on your words. Even if I have to go to the ends of the earth, I will find you, old man. I mean it." The next train flew past again. Miss Agile was kneeling on the chair and pressing her hands on the glass of the train. Her eyes were wide open as she looked at everything outside, on this special train to the inhuman domain. There were only 3 such magic trains in the whole Eurasian continent. They would travel on a fixed route every day, connecting the platforms of different countries. Each train would only run once a day. In this carriage, there were no other passengers except Long Shirua and Luo Dance. Of course, there were passengers from other platforms. Basically, the platforms of different countries corresponded to the carriages. There were no extra passengers. Long Shirua seemed to be in a good mood, so she didn't care about the little butterfly's behavior at this time, although she was also surprised by the extraordinary civilization of the Western world when she first took this magic train to the inhuman domain. Sister Long. Look, the train is flying in the sky. Okay, don't make a fuss. Long Shirua pulled the little butterfly's ear at this time. When we get out of the station, don't make a fuss on the road. Try not to attract attention, okay? Also, don't talk without my permission. Why? The little butterfly blinked her eyes. She understood the principle of doing more and talking less, but she didn't understand the principle of not talking. You don't speak the language of the Western countries. Long Shirua said patiently. Once you speak, you'll expose that you're from Kelowna. The guys in the inhuman domain are not very friendly to the visitors from Kelowna. Why? Long Shirua said expressionlessly. In short, don't talk if you don't speak the language of the Western countries. But Sister Long, can you speak it? Of course I can. Long Shirua paused and then said disdainfully, I can communicate with them directly with my mind. Why do I have so much trouble? At this time, the conductor on the train pushed a cart into this section of the carriage. It was probably no different from the train in the modern world. There were all kinds of food and drinks on the cart. Of course, the food was probably the specialty of the inhuman domain. When Long Shirua was about to reject the stewardess with the so-called mind communication, the little butterfly next to her had already communicated with the stewardess in fluent Western world language, and successfully ordered a few things. The true dragon of the divine land with a small chin stared blankly at the stewardess, leaving with a smile before swallowing his saliva. You can speak their language? Yes. Luo Pianran nodded and said casually, I've thought about it for 7:05. What? How dare you say it's only 7:05? Long Shirua shook her head and didn't care too much. She said casually, Okay, you can speak after you get out of the station. But still, talk more and watch more. The inhuman domain is more dangerous. Luo Pianran was stunned. She knew that Long Shirua was the most powerful person besides the boss, but she seemed to feel that her sister was a bit serious. Sister Long, is there someone more powerful than you here? She asked inconceivably. Long Shirua shook her head. You can't say that. I can only say that in the inhuman domain, the upper limit of my power doesn't change, but I will die. The little butterfly monster's expression gradually became sluggish. In the next second, she directly threw away the food in her hand and tightly covered her mouth. What are you doing? Long Shirua asked curiously. Luo Pianran just covered her mouth and shook her head. Kelowna Shinryu frowned. What the hell are you doing? We haven't gotten out of the station yet. I won't speak. If you get into danger, Sister Long will die. I don't want Sister Long to die. After saying this sentence quickly and firmly, the little butterfly covered her mouth instantly with a pitiful look. Long Shirua laughed, then shook her head and flicked the child's forehead. Little fool, I said I would die, assuming that there is an existence similar to me here, and it intends to die together with me. Really? When did I lie to you? Long Shirua rubbed her head and explained, in the inhuman domain, I can't get the power from the Kelowna Dragonland. But in the inhuman domain, there is something called magic element and the amount of aura is very weak. Magic element is not very suitable for us to absorb, but it can be refined, but the efficiency is too low. Do you understand what I mean? I understand. That is to say, Sister Long doesn't have the power source of the Kelowna Dragonland here, right? Power source. The dragon vein of the Kelowna Dragonland would cry. Probably. Long Shirua rolled her eyes. Anyway, that's the case. But if we keep a low profile, there will be no problem. Besides, I'm here to return a favor, not to trample on others' territory. But you haven't told me why people in the inhuman domain are not friendly to the visitors from Kelowna Dragonland. Well, there are various reasons. I can't tell you all at once. Long Shirua said perfunctorily. I'll tell you when I have the chance. Why do you have so many questions? Luo Dance giggled. As long as Sister Long is fine. In this way, I can continue to stay with Sister Long. And if Boss is also here, that's the best. And Sister Zijuan, we are like a family, living together all the time. A family. Long Shiro was stunned. A small drama in Shinryu Kelowna's mind suddenly began to play. The plot went like this: Boss smiling, Shiro, you're back. The meal will be ready soon. Do you want to eat or take a bath first? Or, well, take a bath first. Luo dance. Sister Long, I went to the supermarket with the boss today and bought your favorite brand of beer. Well, good girl. Boss, come on, open your mouth and have a taste. You must be tired after a day's work. Well, not bad. Give me a massage, I'm a bit tired. Pa. Shinryu Kelowna suddenly patted her cheeks with both hands. Damn, what's going on? What on earth am I thinking? Sister Long, what's wrong with you? The little butterfly monster looked at her with surprise. Kill mosquitoes. Mosquitoes? The magic train suddenly jolted. The true dragon of the divine land hurriedly stood up as if he had been saved. He pulled Luo Dance's hand and dragged her into the air. Then, he rushed out of the magic train and left the platform like a gust of wind. It was indeed a world fragment. After passing through the flames in the fireplace of Maria's magic house, Luocho had the same feeling as when he entered the world of Yenwu. The difference was that in the inhuman domain, there did not seem to be a god's function similar to Yenwu, nor was there a so-called divine right. Instead, there was another strange operating system that managed the entire inhuman domain. Wow! Maria's exclamation came directly to his ears. It turned out that after passing through the flames, the place directly reached was not the ground, but the sky. Seeing her body directly hit the ground at a very fast speed, the witch who ran the magic house hurriedly took out her magic wand and pointed it directly to the ground. In a flash, a sapling grew out of the ground at a very fast speed. The leaves of the sapling instantly became bigger and finally caught her at the moment when she hit the ground. But because of the rebound, Miss Witch finally fell to the ground. She hurriedly stood up, but at this moment, Boss Luo had landed steadily, and caught the falling Miss Maid with both hands. 10 points. She wanted to say so, but then she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat, because Master Pansy said indifferently, Miss Maria, is this the relatively remote place you said? This. Maria forced a smile. After all, it's an illegal coordinate. It's good enough to enter. And I really don't know why it suddenly became a high altitude this time. I clearly appeared on the ground last time. I really didn't lie. Boss Luo put Yi down at this moment and then looked around. This place seems a bit strange. It's probably terrain alteration. Miss Maid said softly, in the inhuman territory. Sometimes the original structure can't be maintained due to the instability of the energy that maintains the territory. Usually, it's expressed as a sudden change of terrain, so it's also called terrain alteration. After the manager here repairs it, it should be able to stabilize. It turned out to be a terrain alteration. Maria was thoughtful at this time, and then she quickly said, Both of you, let's leave this place quickly. Because the coordinate entered from the territory of the 13 families. We need to pass through this territory, and then we can reach the association's autonomous area, which is also the place where Fafnir lives now. If we move quickly, it will take about half a day's journey. The territory of the 13 families? Boss Luo asked curiously. Maria nodded and said casually, Yes, there's a farm of the 13 families nearby. It's a farm used to raise purebloods in captivity. Those guys are very strict with their food, and they are also very neurotic. If we stay here for a long time and are discovered by them, they will probably think that we are planning to come here to hunt illegally. Farm. Boss Luo said this word carefully. Maria shrugged and said, Don't you know? The pureblood farms are provided for the aristocrats of the 13 families to enjoy, and the portion allocated to other low-level vampires is very small. So, there are also groups that specialize in hunting from the pure-blood farms among the Inhumans. They sell to the low-level vampires through the black market. The demand is quite high. Last year, I bought 600 cubic centimeters of pure blood from a pure blood hunter, and it was all snatched in less than an hour. Let's talk while walking. There are often law enforcement teams patrolling nearby. They are all guys that are not to be trifled with. Law enforcement team. Luoqiu blinked and looked up. Are they wearing black trench coats with blood-colored bat symbols and black military caps? Yes, haven't you seen them before? Maria was stunned. Yes, I see them now. Boss Luo nodded. Now? Maria opened her mouth, then followed Luoqiu's gaze, turned around, raised her head, and looked up. Her face instantly collapsed. In midair, there were 10 guys wearing black trench coats and black military cap. They were looking at them with cold eyes. They were lined up in a row. Genius remembered this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 1326. It's probably an alternative style, Luoqiu thought. Basically, in the modern world, except for soldiers, it was rare to see people wearing military uniforms. Of course, if they were OS enthusiasts, there would probably be many similar characters. At this time, under the gaze of the 3 people, the 10 patrol members of the 13 families in the air slowly descended. One of them was holding a long whip with a black snake pattern in his hand. He was slender like a male model, and his 3-dimensional facial features gave people a strict sense of beauty. Ms. Maria's face couldn't be seen because she was still wearing the paper bag mask. She even complained that the paper bag mask was not scientific at all since it wasn't damaged at all. Finally, the man with the black leather whip came in front of Luoqiu and the other 2 people. He looked at them and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why did you break into the pure-blood farm of the Torito family?" So far, it could be said that it was a normal patrol team that encountered unknown people, so they went up to ask, "Torito family?" Hearing that, Maria seemed to be a little happier. "So this is the territory of the Torito family. That's great." The questioner couldn't help but frown. This woman with a paper bag on her head looked very suspicious. "This is the Torito family's territory. We are quite lucky." At this time, Maria whispered to Boss Luo and Mississippi Maid, "Among the 13 clans, this clan is one of the few clans that are relatively strict. In addition, the vampires of the Torito family prefer to pursue beautiful things, romantic and affectionate. So, it should be fine." After explaining clearly, "Leave the negotiation to me." With that, without waiting for Boss Luo and Miss Maid to respond, Maria quickly walked in front of the patrol team. "Here's the thing, I'm a free magic merchant from Britain. Britain can't enter the inhuman territory through the normal coordinates. I believe you have heard about it, right?" Maria said pitifully, "We really have no choice but to use the illegal coordinates." The male vampire who seemed to be the captain frowned slightly. Maria hurriedly said, "I'm very sorry for trespassing into your clan's territory. However, I know the rules. I will pay 3 people's worth of fine. We are really not pure-blooded hunters. Here, this is the merchant certification from the Magician Association. You can verify it." The captain of the patrol team asked someone to bring the so-called certificate over. After glancing at it casually, he threw the card on the ground and sneered, "This month, including you, this is the 5th time I've heard such an explanation. Don't you guys have any new excuses?" "The 5th time." Maria was stunned for a moment before she said subconsciously, "Are the pure-blooded hunters so arrogant nowadays? I really don't know. I haven't returned to the inhuman domain for half a year." "Pretty good at acting." The patrol captain snorted coldly. "Catch these guys of unknown origin, especially this disgusting woman with a paper bag. Do you think I want to wear this thing?" Maria was angry at first, and then she began to panic. She didn't expect to have a conflict with the 13 clans as soon as she entered them in human domain. Looking at the 9 patrol team members who surrounded her, Maria's mind turned quickly, and then she suddenly said, "Wait a minute, I still have something that can prove my identity." Magic merchants are protected by the Inhuman Domain regulations. You don't want to break the rules and have a conflict with the entire Merchant Alliance, right? Take out your certificate. The patrol captain pondered for a moment before he raised his hand to stop his subordinate. At this time, Maria slowly reached into her collar and took out something. Her 5 fingers clenched and stretched out, and then she slowly opened her palm under the watchful eyes of the patrol team members. "What is this?" The patrol captain couldn't help but frown again. He really couldn't see what was in Maria's palm. It seemed to be a few seeds. At this time, Maria quickly threw the seeds in her hand forward, and then waved the magic wand in her hand. The moment the seeds were thrown out, they grew crazily, and thorny vines burst out, instantly entangling the 10 patrol team members. It seemed that it was difficult for them to break free from the entanglement of these vines. Maria took advantage of this time to quickly return to Boss Luo and Miss Maid, and hurriedly said, "It seems that something has happened, and I can't explain it clearly. While they are entangled, let's quickly leave. As long as we enter the association's autonomous region, we will be fine. The people of the 13 clans have no law enforcement authority in the autonomous region. Come, follow me." With that, Maria once again took out a pumpkin about the size of a longan from her collar that seemed to be connected to another dimension, and then she ran forward. With a sound of a bow, the small pumpkin instantly turned into a pumpkin carriage that was as tall as a person. Maria sat on the driver's seat of the pumpkin carriage without saying anything. "What are you waiting for? There is no time to explain. Quickly get on the carriage." This was very dreamy. Boss Luo, who seemed to have walked into a fairy tale world, couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Then he glanced at the 10 patrol team members who were entangled by the vines and smiled at Miss Maid. "I wonder if there will be a Cinderella and a crystal shoe. If you want a crystal shoe, I will give you a dozen later." Maria said anxiously, "My thorn seeds won't be able to entangle them for long." Luocio opened the door and helped Miss Maid into the carriage. Then he followed her into the pumpkin carriage. The interior of the carriage was more spacious than it looked from the outside. "Sit tight, Your Highness, Your Highness!" Maria shouted at this time, and then she pulled the reins in her hand slightly excitedly. This pumpkin carriage was not entangled by the reins of the horses. 2 small whirlwinds appeared, and the carriage rushed out directly. Behind them, a trace of anger flashed in the eyes of the patrol team leader of the Toredo clan. Then he shouted in a low voice, exposed his fangs, and finally broke the vines that had tightened to the limit. "Sir Thomas." But the other 9 patrol team members were obviously much worse. They were being entangled by the thorn seeds and were suffering unspeakably. "Humph!" The patrol team leader, Captain Thomas, snorted coldly at this time. His hand turned into a knife and flashed through the crowd, cutting off all the vines. "Thank you, Captain." The patrol team members hurriedly thanked him, but then one of them said in shock, "Captain, the direction they are escaping in is chase." Captain Thomas's eyes narrowed instantly, and then he ordered coldly. Captain Thomas didn't wait for his subordinates to respond. A pair of red and black bat wings unfolded behind him, and he chased in the direction of the pumpkin carriage. Boom! 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 Maria's hands were trembling slightly. Around the pumpkin carriage, the patrols that were relentlessly chasing after them were now attacking crazily. Maria felt like dying at this moment. The only thing she could be thankful for was that she had been wearing a paper bag from the beginning to the end. At the very least, she didn't expose her original appearance in front of Toredo's patrol team. In this case, it seems that I have to thank Master Pansy properly? Maria subconsciously turned her head to look inside the carriage. In fact, it would be better if she didn't look, but once she did, Maria felt like collapsing. The 2 people in the carriage were drinking tea. She didn't see wrongly. Master Pansy was holding a teapot, and Boss Luo was drinking tea while looking at the scenery outside. Occasionally, he would say a few words. I'm in a life-or-death situation, and these two are still in the mood to drink tea and chat? So infuriating! Then, when Boss Luo looked at Ms. Witch and smiled, Ms. Witch instantly felt healed. Sure enough, young magicians with healing abilities are the best. Ms. Witch, who had been single for decades, was immersed in this smile, and her brain didn't think about why Master Pansy seemed to be doing something like a maid at this moment. Maria head mask. What? In front. In front? Maria subconsciously turned her head, and at the end of the pumpkin carriage was a cliff. Obviously, it was too late to pull back the reins. Thus, the pumpkin carriage directly rushed out of the cliff. Then, under the effect of gravity, it turned into a long parabola and crashed into a huge castle below the cliff. It was surrounded by cliffs on all sides, and the bottom was bottomless, but the majestic castle was still built. Every time Zhong Luoyue saw this steep and magnificent castle, she would have a feeling of disbelief, even though she was already an inhuman. You've been here for a few days. Are you still not used to it? Elizabeth slowly walked to Zhong Luoyue and said softly, Do you miss your family? Zhong Luoyue glanced at the darkness below and shook her head slightly. I just feel a bit unreal. Maybe it's the feeling of uneasiness before the first transformation. It's okay. Elizabeth held her hand and said, Basically, the failure rate of a vampire's first metamorphosis is almost zero. But all of the clansmen will feel nervous. Zhong Luoyue smiled and did not say much. In fact, it was not the first time that he felt so nervous when he was about to undergo a metamorphosis. Being in this place, he felt a chill all the time. This was the inhuman domain. Elizabeth shook her head. It's a pity that I didn't know that the Magician Association had closed all the coordinates in Britain. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to be in such a hurry and choose to enter from the Teredo territory. But don't worry, the Teredo clan is a clan that is easy to get along with. They have already agreed to let you use the secret room here to complete your first transformation, so you can rest assured. Oh? Did they agree? Zhong Luoyue had a hint of joy on his face. The first transformation of a vampire was divided into several different types, and according to the quality of the first transformation, the potential of the vampire would be affected. It was said that the best way was to use the Holy Room of the 13 clans for transformation, followed by the Secret Room, followed by the ordinary blood pool. There was also a type that couldn't use the above 3. It could only be done with simple preparation. Basically, for a wild vampire like Zhong Luoyue, who knew nothing and whose elders were dead, he could only use the secret room that was equipped with high specifications. Obviously, it was because he was hugging Elizabeth. Hearing that this matter had been settled, Zhong Luoyue had a feeling that the previous investment had begun to pay off. But you must have paid a lot, Elizabeth. Zhong Luoyue sighed at this time. Is it worth it for me? Elizabeth smiled and said, Now your identity has been registered under my name. As your elder, if I don't prepare for your transformation, I will be ridiculed. You don't have to worry about the cost. Did you forget that at that time I became rich because of Brother Luochio? Zhong Luoyue subconsciously fell into memory. Although it was only a matter of a few months, it felt very long. She didn't know if she could see that person again. Perhaps only Elizabeth would think that they would definitely meet again. But anyway, she had become an inhuman, because of that time in Tushini's manor. She didn't know if the Song family, since Luochio came from the Song family, had the Song family also stepped into the inhuman level? Ah! The screams suddenly startled the guests who were in the castle in the territory of the Teredo clan. When they looked in the direction of the sound, they saw something falling directly from the top of the balcony. Then, a huge leaf grew crazily on the floor of the balcony, remembering the falling object. It was a suspicious woman wearing a paper bag head mask. Just as he was shocked, he saw two more figures slowly descend from above. As if there was a pair of invisible wings behind them. Holding hands, they finally landed successfully like a dragonfly touching the water. 10 points. This was the instinctive reaction of Maria, who had bounced off the leaf and rolled to the wall of the room. Her body was upside down, her legs were spread, and her skirt was flipped open, revealing her black breasts. "It's you!" Zhong Luoyue instantly opened her eyes wide, and the world was spinning. Elizabeth opened her mouth, and her eyes were full of disbelief. She put her hands together in front of her chest and muttered to herself, "Am I dreaming? Long time no see, both of you." Luochio didn't put down the servant girl's hand, and just smiled and greeted them casually. Let fate decide. Chapter 13:27. The huge floating castle that looked like a fortress started to become noisy. "Hurry up! Go over there and have a look. You guys, check this way. You must find them. They are very likely to have infiltrated the castle." Layer by layer. Finally, two vampires in patrol uniforms knocked on the door of the room where Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue were staying. In order to let Zhong Luoyue use the secret room of the Toreador clan, Elizabeth had paid a large sum of money to the Toreador clan. Correspondingly, the reception she received in this castle was also quite high. "Sorry to disturb you, Miss Elizabeth." The patrol member was quite polite. "What happened?" Elizabeth asked curiously. "I see that everyone is getting nervous. There are a few trespassers, and it is very likely that they have infiltrated the castle." The patrol member quickly said, "Miss Elizabeth, we want to search your room. I hope you can cooperate." While speaking, the patrol member did not forget to observe Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue's expressions. However, he did not see anything unusual from their expressions. Elizabeth said generously, "I will cooperate with you. Patrol guards, please come in." She stepped aside. The two patrolling guards looked at each other and nodded. Then, "Sorry for being rude." Zhong Luoyue did not speak. As a newborn vampire who had not completed her first transformation, her status in the vampire world was even lower than that of a commoner. Of course, because of Elizabeth, it was more special. However, the third daughter of the Zhong family had been immersed in politics and business since she was young. Naturally, she knew that it was best to keep silent at this time. The two patrol guards were quite polite and well-behaved when searching the room. After a while, they did not find anything. After leaving a few words, they quickly left the room. When the two patrol guards disappeared from sight, Zhong Luoyue expressionlessly closed the door of the room. Elizabeth was relieved. She pressed her hands on her slightly bulging chest and stuck out her tongue. "You scared me, you." "All right." Unexpectedly, Zhong Luoyue walked directly to Elizabeth and covered her mouth. She shook her head slightly and gestured for her to keep quiet. Elizabeth was stunned. Zhong Luoyue raised her voice slightly. "I wonder where the guy who broke in came from?" Elizabeth understood what she meant at this time, so she quickly said, "It should be poachers. I heard that there have been more poachers recently. I hope it's not something troublesome. I'm most afraid that it will affect the time to use the secret room." Zhong Luoyue said, "The patrolling guards of the Toreador clan are all powerful warriors. There should be no problem. By the way, we haven't eaten anything today." They began to talk about things that were not important. Outside the door, a figure slowly came down from the wall. Then, without looking, it quickly disappeared from the corridor. Elizabeth put down the utensils in her hand and closed her eyes to feel for a while. Then she nodded and said, "Okay, I'm really leaving this time." Originally, it was easy for her to detect whether someone was eavesdropping outside with her telepathic perception. This telepathic perception was developed after she drank Luochio's blood in the manor of Tushini, the god of gamblers in South America. It was very mysterious, and Elizabeth had not fully figured out its specific function until now. However, this kind of telepathic perception was very powerful and had a high degree of secrecy. When she entered the castle of the Torito clan, she tried to use this ability to investigate the situation inside the castle. She found that even the Grand Duke of the Torito clan who lived here didn't seem to notice her prying. However, Elizabeth did not have the habit of spying on everything all the time. She also did not expect that the guards would quietly return after leaving. How did you know they came back quietly? Elizabeth could not help but blink curiously at this time. Zhong Luiyue said indifferently, I don't know, it's just a guess. You can never go wrong if you are careful. Okay, you can let them out now. Yes, Brother Luochio. Elizabeth lifted her skirt and hurriedly ran into the bedroom. Then she opened the wardrobe. You can come out now, it's okay. At this time, a zipper suddenly appeared inside the wardrobe. Then, a palm stretched out and pulled down the zipper all the way. After that, Maria's legs stepped out of the wardrobe. Then, Boss Luo came out. After Boss Luo came out, he turned around and stretched out his hand to lead Miss Maid out. Or, they just walked out of the wardrobe like this. After that, Maria pulled down the zipper from the inside of the wardrobe and began to stuff it into her collar. The collection of collars seemed to be comparable to Boss Luo's backpack. It seems that the dimensional zipper that I spent a lot of money to buy is really prescient. Maria sighed at this time and felt lucky to have escaped a disaster at this time. Well, I didn't expect the space inside to be so spacious. It doesn't seem crowded even with 3 people. Luochio smiled and said, Miss Maria's props are very convenient. From the seed to the pumpkin carriage to the magical zipper, Boss Luo had seen a lot of magician's props today. Compared to the more straightforward power model of the extraordinaries in Kelowna, it seemed that the non-humans in the Western world were more sophisticated in the use of their abilities. However, it was also possible that he had not seen similar things in Kelowna yet, but it did not mean that there was no such thing. He was not a person who easily made a judgment and liked to compare. It was not difficult to admit that something was interesting or practical in fact. Thank you, Miss Elizabeth. Luochio looked at Elizabeth and said. Elizabeth hurriedly waved her hand and said, It's okay. As long as I can help Brother Luochio, I will be very happy. That Brother Luochio this is? Her small eyes looked at the 2 hands that were still holding each other from time to time. Girlfriend, Luochio said very casually. When Maria heard this, she had an expression that said, I knew it would be like this. Nobody saw it. Elizabeth softly said, and seemed a little depressed after that. On the other hand, Zhong Luoyue, who was leaning against the door at this time, was now expressionless at this time. She began to think about the final direction of this matter at this time. Speaking of which, how did you come to the inhuman domain, at this time? Luochio looked around and then broke the silence at this time. Elizabeth suddenly at this time, she began to briefly explain what happened after Luochio last time. It turns out that you came for Miss Zhong's first transformation. Luochio nodded. Elizabeth hurriedly said at this time, yes, if Brother Luochio didn't scare the supervisor last time, I may not be able to take out so many resources for you to use the secret room, to transform. Maybe I can only use the ordinary blood pool at this time. This vampire's original situation was not very good. She was a mixed-blood human, and her grandfather was even a former knight of the Round Table. Otherwise, she would not need to sleep for such a long time to reduce the need for food. Luochio just smiled at this. Speaking of which, last time he casually used the name of Erex because of a bad taste. He did not expect that it would change Elizabeth's situation a lot. Everyone, it seems that now is not the time to reminisce. Don't you want to discuss the next thing? Zhong Luoyue suddenly knocked on the door lightly, when Elizabeth mentioned the kindness brought by Luochio. At this time, Maria felt that she had found a bosom friend. If she was not afraid of offending Master Pansy and then making some strange requests, she would actually be the one who wanted to mention this question the most. She was not as carefree as this man and woman, who did not have any sense of nervousness at all. This was the inside of the castle of the Torito clan. Not to mention the sleeping Grand Duke of Torito, there were probably many vampires above the level of Earl. It was simply a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. There was still room to maneuver if they trespassed into other people's territory, but now they were in their castle, that's right. Luocha nodded. We also agreed to Miss Maria's request, so it's not good to stay here all the time. You still want to stay here all the time? Zhong Luyue's heart skipped a beat. She just nodded calmly and then said, In that case, let's consider the way out. But this castle is surrounded by cliffs. No matter where you leave, I'm afraid that you will be discovered by the guards in the castle's watchtower. It's not easy to leave. Luocha said, Miss Zhong, do you have any good ideas? Zhong Luyue said, I don't know if you have the ability to hide. If you do, maybe things will be much simpler. Maria said directly, Let's hear it. Strangely, except for Boss Luo and Miss Maid, neither of them asked about each other's background. They just discussed how to leave this place. Zhong Luoyue only wanted her transformation to be completed smoothly and didn't want any side issues. But the trouble had come, so she had to think about how to end it. Originally, in her point of view, the best choice was not to help. But she couldn't change Elizabeth's mind. So she could only acquiesce in this help and think about how to deal with the aftermath and how to maximize the benefits for both sides. As for Maria, it was much simpler. Leave here as soon as possible. Every day, some people will be sent to the castle from the farms outside. These people will be supplied to the vampires in the castle. Zhong Luoyue paused. I won't say more about the pureblood farms. Anyway, it seems that you have more experience as inhuman. Let's talk about leaving directly. Zhong Luoyue looked around. I've observed these days. Basically, there will be 2 batches of humans sent in every day, and the time is fixed. And these humans, after having their blood sucked, will be sent back to the farms to cultivate and produce blood, waiting for the next extraction. So, do you understand? You mean we should mix in with these humans and wait to be sent out of this place? Maria muttered. Zhong Luoyue nodded. That's right. This method is very simple, but it's obviously the safest method at the moment. The number of people transported each time is fixed, but all you have to do is knock out 3 humans and replace them. According to my observation, because this pattern is fixed for a long time, the guards of the food delivery will be very lax compared to the guards of the patrol team. Don't forget. Maria frowned at this time. Now the castle is full of guards of the patrol team. Usually, the guys who deliver the food delivery may be lax, but not this time. At least, before they find us, I don't think the guards of the patrol team will be lax in any place, especially your method. I think it's more obvious. They will definitely think that if we want to leave, we will probably use this method. Perhaps they are already guarding the road now. Zhong Luoyue said, because this method is too obvious, the guards of the patrol team will think that you won't use this method. Haven't you heard of such a story? A thief is going to sneak into a rich man's house to steal his jewelry. After knowing this, the rich man installed traps everywhere in the house, and arranged layers of traps everywhere the thief could sneak in, but in the end, the thief walked in from the front door openly and easily took away the jewelry? You're gambling. Maria still shook her head. You think they are so, but if they are not, we are digging our own graves. Otherwise, how do you plan to leave? Zhong Luoyue asked expressionlessly. Maria indicated that she did not know. She paced back and forth in the room irritably, arguing with Zhong Luoyue about whether the guards of the patrol team would think that they would sneak into the food and leave. They actually began to argue and argue endlessly, trying to convince the other party. On the side, Boss Luo and Miss Maid, who were obviously not interested in this, had come to the terrace with Elizabeth and began to look around the castle. That transportation route is used to transport food, Luo Yunyang said. Elizabeth's clear voice began to sound, because as food, humans are not allowed to have power, so they can only transport through this cable. As she spoke, the cable had begun to move slowly. A huge basket was hanging on it, and many so-called crops could be seen vaguely in the basket. These people, have they always lived here? Luochio suddenly asked at this time. I mean, the farm. Elizabeth nodded and said, yes, their ancestors have lived here for at least 1,000 years, right? The 13 ancient clans believe that the blood of ancient people is much purer than that of today, so they have been carefully managing the farm for so many years. Genius remembered this site's address in a second. Mobile version of reading website.